This is Comic Geek Speak, episode 1561, DC's Convergence event.
I'm Brian Chrisman.
I'm Shane Kelly.
I'm Chris Eberly.
And I'm Adam Murda.
And welcome to the show. In this episode, we will do our best to go through the most recent mega event at DC Comics, Convergence. And to help us out with this, we have a longtime listener and fellow podcaster on the line, Chad Burdett. Welcome back to the show, Chad.
Thanks for having me.
Hello, Chad.
Good evening.
Yes, thank you for joining in this gloriously sadomasochistic undertaking to talk about
Definitely.
the whole massive event.
Yes, so we are going, well, I will let, who wants to sort of give the overview of what we're going to do in this episode? Murd, why don't you just tell us what's going to happen in this episode?
All right, I'll give it a shot. Okay, well, as you folks listening probably know, we did promise you a little while ago that we would be talking about the one-shot that kicked off the whole Convergence event, Convergence number 0, as an off-the-rack stick. And we intend to make good on that promise to start with. We'll take a look at that, give it our Buy Borrow Pants rating. We may have a few general remarks about the 8-issue miniseries, the spine of the whole Convergence event after that. But the bulk of the episode is going to be us taking on the Herculean task of going through each and every one of the first issues, just the first issues, mind you, at this point, of all of the little 2-issue Convergence miniseries focusing on specific DC characters in specific DC time periods. We're going to be going through them mostly alphabetically within the 4 waves in which they were released. So we'll do all 10 of the pre-Flashpoint one-shots from the Atom to the Titans. Then we'll do, in alphabetical order, all 10 of the pre-Zero Hour one-shots, and so on until we've gotten through all 40 of them. We'll have more to say about some than others, but we'll at least give a couple of words and a rating to each one.
That sounds pretty good. I'm going to, for the most part, recuse myself from the conversations. I haven't read the Convergence. I did read issue 0, however. I will sort of be your guide if you all throw in a few questions now and then. And we're just going to go from there. So, Murd, I guess, how do you want to get this started here?
Go.
All right. Well, I guess we just pick up and dive into Convergence number 0.
Right. So, as anybody on the line, if you have anything to say, just jump in. Chad, Chris, Murd, Shane, because we're all different parts of the country. And
yes, we are.
Sometimes it's tough to get everything together. So
underneath our own little dome.
Right. So just jump in if you have anything to say. Like now would be a good time.
Well, why don't we give our initial ratings on Convergence number 0?
Capital idea. Chris?
All right. Shane, you want to start?
Reading this, I'd have given it a buy.
I'll go. I give it a pants.
Oh, okay. Well, for me, it was a buy.
I'll give it a borrow.
All right. Going in and reading this before reading anything else, which is exactly what I did, I enjoyed the art. I enjoyed...
Well, mention the creative team on the book.
Well, let's see. Dan Jurgens and Jeff King wrote it. Ethan Van Sciver was on art.
Sorry.
What do you say that? Marcelo Malio was colors. Maiolo, thank you. Travis Lanham did letters, and Van Sciver and Maiello, did I say it? Butchered it again. Did the cover.
And this was a $4.99 cover price.
All right. Not realizing that, I wouldn't recommend everyone go spend $5 on it, but I did.
DCBS had it for 75% off, though, at $1.25.
And that, it's worth it for me. I enjoyed the art. I enjoyed what it said, kind of setting up everything for an event. My favorite part of the book really was seeing all the different brainiacs, seeing the first, in the first 5 pages or so, because they're not numbered, of course, the different Superman scenes that were from all kinds of different Earths. That was kind of neat to see. And I enjoyed the back matter a little bit with all the different issues that it featured, kind of explaining the different Earths that were involved. So I thought it did a pretty good job of setting up something that was coming for an event. It brought in the Superman from the New 52, and he got a tour of all kinds of different Earths through all different variations of Brainiac. They even threw in, which I thought was brilliant, the animated Brainiac, which looked a little different to me than all the other Brainiacs.
Right.
Towards the end of the book, there's a great page. I wish it would have been a little bit bigger, of every different Brainiac that you see. It's like 1/3 or 1/4 of the page towards the end of the story. But no, I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. That changes through the rest of the miniseries for me, as we will get into just a little bit. But I thought this Zero issue did a good enough job of setting up what was going to happen, pulling in the different cities, and Brainiac kind of explaining what was going to happen. Not that I think it did a good job in execution later, but I thought this issue did a pretty good job of what it was supposed to do.
Now, I'm curious, did anybody read the, what was it, the Doomsday, Superman Doomsday stuff that led up to this?
No.
I did not.
I tried.
Nor did I. You're a better man than we then, Chad.
Well,
I'll go.
I was
just going to say that it would have been, maybe kind of nice if they would have made some kind of, little editor's note to, that's why, Superman is where he is.
Yeah, because on the very first page, he's like, "Where am I? How did I get here?" And it says, "The last thing I remember is Brainiac infecting me with a Doomsday virus." So I figured that much out, I guess, but it's somewhat, you're thrown into the story and go.
I did kind of I didn't feel like I left anything out. I just figured, okay, that came before, and I just didn't even bother thinking about what would have come before that.
I think that's emblematic of an unfortunate trend both companies are following, where they just seem to want to refuse us any kind of recap matter of any kind in their major events, which to me is completely inexplicable. Yeah. So, and one of the many reasons I pants this book. Do you want me to go?
Go.
I didn't want to. All right. Granted, I can appreciate what Shane said, because I know the basics of Brainiac, but not as well as some of my comrades in arms here. I approach this, again, as always, from both the retailer perspective and the reader perspective. Once again, right away, any book that's $5, I have a really hard time giving it any kind of recommendation.
Yeah, 30 pages of content and plus those back matter, it seemed to me a little pricey.
That is a little pricey for that.
Yeah. Was Secret Wars 1 $4.99?
I don't think so.
Hang on a minute.
Because I thought that was a rare book that is actually worth that, because of the quality of the production of the book and the quality of the story, especially because it was part of a event that they've been building up to for quite some time. To me,
looks like it was in the $4.99.
It was? Okay. That's a rare exception for me. To me, for this kind of event, and part of this for me, again, is like the retail politics. I was not engaged by this story. Frankly, I was bored by it. By the end of it, I didn't care about anything that was going on inside it. I didn't find the writing particularly engaging or exciting or evocative in any way, shape, or form. This reeked of we put this together in 5 minutes because we're moving and we're going to, dump this stuff out here as quickly as we can. I find it just a very cynical, poorly executed, promotional piece of junk. So having said that, when we talk about some of the miniseries, some of those I did enjoy, but I think for DC this is a low, and another example of why I'm reading more and more independent comics and fewer superhero comics. So I don't want to be too negative. So that's all I'll say about Convergence number 0.
It just seemed a little wordy for me. Just kind of them talking back and forth. It was hard for me to concentrate on the story.
I think that's a good point too, because who wrote this again, Pants? I'm sorry. Who wrote the first issue?
Jeff King and Dan Jurgens.
Okay. Dan Jurgens is a good writer.
Yeah, you can't have a big DC event the last 25 years or so without Dan Jurgens. 0 Hour, 52, and just on and on and on.
Yeah. Forgive me, I don't know who Jeff King is. And after reading the rest of this Convergence, I don't want to know. But, you know, if you're going to charge readers, most people who are working very hard in their lives to try to make ends meet, that's kind of money for a comic book. You got to pull all the stops out and deliver a superlative piece of material. This is very, very, very far away from that. And I think as a contrast to Secret Wars, I'd love to know which company decided to copy the other when they did this, which I think is hilarious.
Yeah.
If you're gonna try to go up against Secret Wars, which I think, I'm not just saying this because I love Marvel, I love DC too. It's just that I think that there's a chasm between the quality in these two opening events, essentially. So that's all I'll say about that, gentlemen.
Jeff King, he writes TV. I'm trying to look up to see what exactly he has been involved in, but he's a TV writer or producer or something like that.
Oh, another one of those writing comics.
Yeah, well, according to Wikipedia, which of course we know it can't be is 100% accurate, it says he is a Canadian screenwriter, television producer, and film director.
He should stick with that.
He worked on Due South. He worked on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Models Inc., Strange Days, Mutant X, and White Collar.
Well, to be fair, I mean, maybe there was a lot of editorial meddling with this too. I mean, I wouldn't know that, but oof. I'm sorry, Murd, you go. I think you enjoyed it more than I did. So
it's true. Well, this first issue I did at least. You know, I'll confess I haven't actually seen anything of several issues of the 8-issue main Convergence miniseries. I flipped through the first two, and I flipped through the last two, and based on that exposure, I can see what you're saying, Chris, about this being kind of a cynical, cobbled together, improvised bricoleur of a story. But I really did enjoy this Zero issue. I mean, I agree with a lot of things that Shane said about how it does the work of a good number 0 setup issue for a major event. It did succeed in piquing my interest, at least. Superman just kind of blowing in from no place. While I, in common with everybody except poor valiant Chad, also in common with all of you, I didn't read the Doomsday Virus story. I think it's. I think we had enough recap to let us know what happened. Brainiac infected him with the Doomsday Virus. They fought, and he popped himself through a black hole, and now he finds himself here. He doesn't know where he is. We don't know where he is. We're supposed to share in his disorientation. He encounters this strange, godlike Brainiac, kind of recasting Brainiac from computer tyrant to more like a cosmic entity, like a trans-dimensional force, who would try to tell Superman that every single version of Brainiac that's ever existed is just an unknowing extension or avatar of his being, which is an interesting concept, an explanation that they backpedaled from slightly by the end of the Convergence series. I know they give a different explanation for how this Brainiac came to be, and then he captures Superman, and then Superman breaks free, and he spends the rest of the time in this, as Chad said, very extended and wordy verbal joust with the major domo of this planet he finds himself on, out in the void beyond time and space. And this entity assumes the forms of all these different Brainiacs, and he tries to get Superman to pick one of these bottled cities under domes all over the planet as his permanent home. And then somehow, something about interacting with Superman then changes this entity's mind, and he instead chooses to expel the New 52 Superman, send him back to his universe with no memory of what he's just seen, and then this being Telos, we eventually learn is his name, decides that he's going to have this little contest, this little death match, this Hunger Games style tournament between all these different selections of DC reality to see who's best suited to survive. And we are teased that whichever city/reality wins is going to have a place in the New 52 multiverse. So all of this is a little bit prolix and a tiny bit confusing to Superman as well as to the reader, but still it's chock full of little nods to DC history. I agree with Shane that all the different Brainiacs are a lot of fun to see. It's all drawn by Ethan Van Sciver, which is always enjoyable for people with my artistic taste. Anyway, I love the way he rendered this whole thing. There's one big 2-page splash panel just before the midpoint of the comic where you see this truly vertiginous image of a giant mechanical Brainiac, Superman, and like this M.C. Escher style mishmash of like 5 or 6 different captive cities all put together, all seen from this dizzying overhead angle. That's quite an accomplishment there in page layout, Mr. Van Sciver. And then, of course, there's the back matter. Shane also mentioned that, all the little mini short blurbs about various realities, some of which don't actually even appear in the Convergence event. I guess they're thrown in there as red herrings, or maybe when they finally finished parsing the event out, there wasn't room to include all of them. But yeah, as a fan of handbooks, the who's who in Convergence pages were kind of a neat thing to see for me. And plus, I counted, you do get 30 pages of actual story here. So that plus the 30 pages, it still maybe isn't quite worth the $5 price of admission. But thanks to our friends at DCB Service, $1.25, I really feel like I got quite a bargain. So yeah, maybe you need to be a big fan of DC history and slightly pedantic and convoluted treatments thereof to be into something like this. But first, it did it for me, and it actually did make me kind of excited for the Convergence event to follow, even if the main miniseries itself was, as we've hinted, something of a letdown. But yeah, just on the strength of this one issue itself, I give that a buy.
All right, fair enough. And Pants, did you read Zero or no?
I did. I'd have to probably, at best, give it a borrow. Again, the price really didn't do much for me. And I'm also not in the DC universe at all. I haven't read them for well over a year, maybe even 2 years. And so I guess I had a bit of that prejudice going on for me. I just didn't.
Well, and speaking of price, which I just looked at the Convergence minis themselves, number 1 and number 8 were also $5, and all the ones in between were $3.99. That's hefty.
Yeah. But
and I'm sorry, Pants, I'm interjecting for a moment. Murd made a good point about DCB Service, and if those readers who are utilizing that service, you're getting a deal. But for a wide variety of reasons, there are many people who are still buying their books from shops or other sources where they're not getting that discount, and it's not worth it for me. It's just I'm sick and tired of this kind of stuff. So anyway.
Yeah, the big two really are not doing their readers and therefore themselves any favors.
No, they're not.
I mean, price points like that.
Yeah. So I didn't jump on after that, and again, that's one of the few DC books I bought over the last couple, 2 years from DC because I just don't buy and don't read any DC comics. So that's why I'm sort of recusing myself. But I may throw in the occasional question now and then. Now, so just to let listeners know, we're not necessarily going to talk about the rest of the series Convergence because not everybody has read the whole end of the series. I know there's been talk about it online. It's been online, but we haven't actually read it. And that's that conversation for a different time, perhaps. But we're going to talk mostly about, I guess, the mini-series.
Now, I read all 8 issues as I was reading these first issues. I had access to the first 8 issues.
Okay.
You
had access to them.
Yeah, I did. Before I got my copies through DCBS, and before I started reading these minis, I was reading the first 4, and then I read the last 4 during the first issue of all these. The only thing I'll say is it certainly does not live up to any expectation I had enjoying the first issue. I don't even think it really ended well. I think it had some interesting tiny parts in it. And by that I mean, say in issue 2, there's 8 to 10 pages of the Batmans that I really loved, me personally, because I know how I am. When I read it, I loved it. There's a lot of people that won't like it, and that's fine. I liked what the Batmans, and I say that plurally, did in issue 2.
Not Batmen?
Not Batman, Batmans.
No, men, Batmen.
I know. So that part of issue 2 I enjoyed. I know a lot of people don't like the first 4. A lot of people like the last 4. I really didn't like any of it more than those few pages in issue 2.
Shane, I was intending to read the whole series because I like to read any event both as a reader and as a retailer.
Yeah.
And I know what you're saying about that Batman moment. That did engage me. But I got to be honest, I could barely get through issue 3 and I just had to stop.
Yeah.
Because I just found, without spoiling anything, I just found the quality so bad for what's supposed to be an event of this magnitude.
It was very haphazard.
And again, it just reeked of, hey, let's throw this out and, copy Marvel or Marvel's copying us, whatever the heck. I'm gonna take a guess and say DC's copying because Marvel's been preparing Secret Wars and all that for a couple years now.
Yeah.
So this reeked of something very cynical and very poorly executed. And when I have to put a book down, where I can't even feel I can finish the series, that to me that speaks volumes.
And I kept hearing people say that once you get to issue 4, it's great. And I kept waiting for that, and that never came for me. As I was reading it, there might be a couple things, and I want to talk to Brian Nixon about a couple things too, because we were texting each other back and forth during different points when I was reading it. But that whole, oh my God, this is great from a certain point forward, that never happened for me through the rest of the issues.
Okay. Well, I just want to get it out there that this series is over, and there are ramifications for it, and we're not really ready to talk about it in this episode. So just want to everybody forewarned. So, oh boy, let's jump into this. And when I say jump in, my God, Murd, unless everybody, if you have anything to say, just jump in, because this, I mean, oh my God, this could be a long episode.
Let's converge. All right. So first on the docket then is going to be the Atom.
Well, once again, I just want to reiterate, as you mentioned so eloquently, that they're just divided into these miniseries. They're 2-issue miniseries, and they're divided into 4 weeks. Week 1, I believe, is pre-Flashpoint characters.
Correct.
Week 2 is pre-Zero Hour characters. Week 3, again, I'm Wikipedia, forgive me, characters from the time of Crisis on Infinite Earths. And then week 4 is pre-Crisis on Infinite Earth characters. That's generally, I believe, how they were released and how they were sort of grouped together. And then there's alphabetical in each sublisting. And now, Murd, the floor is yours, or the airwaves.
Okay. All right, so first up, as I said, is the Atom, with the creative team of Tom Peyer, Steve Yoel, and Andy Owens, with colors by our friend Brian Miller's Hi-Fi Studios. I figure we'll just we're going to use our usual buy, borrow, pants system here, and if anybody participating happens not to have read this particular issue, he may just say NA, and he will be excused immediately. Okay, and I give this issue a buy.
I would give it a borrow.
Strong borrow.
I'll go with buy.
Okay, great. All right, I'll get the ball rolling here. And we're trying not to say too much about any of these because we got a lot to get through here. But this is Tom. First of all, I'd just like to see anything that's written by Tom Peyer on the stands these days. He's one of the most underrated writers in comics, and he doesn't get a lot of work anymore these days. You know, he wrote Our Man, which Shane and I both love. And here he's going back to one of his old specialties, which is playing up the psychological imbalance implicit in costume superheroes. He did that with his portrayal of Rex Tyler a few times. And here he's doing it with our friend Ray Palmer, who is trapped in the dome in pre-Flashpoint Gotham City. And he's experiencing a little bit of the same thing that poor New 52 Aquaman went through in Jeff Johns' relaunch of that character, in that he's a hero that nobody wants anything to do with. And not so much because he's like meta lame, which is what Jeff Johns was doing with Aquaman, but because he's mentally imbalanced. But Peyer he plays around with that a little bit. Ray Palmer seems to be having conversations with himself, but we learn by the end of this issue the reason for that. And he's also got this pretty serious built-in vendetta, so that's like his critical motivation in this issue, in that he's gunning for Deathstroke, who killed his young protege, Dr. Ryan Choi, the all-new Atom. So that conflict is built into this first issue. And then the Convergence event itself rears its head and imposes a different conflict on Dr. Palmer. He's set off to fight this mutant fish thing that's supposed to be like the... He's the extremist version of Namor. He's like a part submariner and part moray eel, which is a fun struggle to witness. He has one superpower. Most characters who are confined under these domes are limited to have their superpowers taken away from him. The Atom has the bizarre superpower to grow his fist to giant size, and that's a great visual. It's like pure Fletcher Hanks. So that just ties into the whole bug house crazy superhero thing that Tom Peyer likes to do, and so it's well written start to finish. It's entertaining lunacy, and we get to see Ray Palmer have a major breakthrough by the end of the issue. He recovers his inner scientist and overcomes his self-pity. He breaks free of the nemesis trap, this obsessive vindictiveness that afflicts far too many superheroes by the end of the issue. And he, after this catharsis, he's reunited with Ryan Choi, who seems not to be dead after all. So there's a little bit of vindication gained there for fans of that character, who was disposed of rather abruptly and unfairly by whoever was in charge of DC at that time. And so if you're a fan of either Adam, I think this is a story you'll enjoy. Goodness knows I did. I gave it a buy.
Shane, go ahead.
I think that's what I enjoyed about it is, for my borrow, is that Ryan was in it interacting with Ray towards the end, and really all the way through the issue in Ray's kind of head and self-talking to himself kind of way. It was fun. I don't know that I would buy a series on it. Part of what my problem with the ones that I wouldn't just go out and just buy were they're not exactly what I expected. And I don't think that throughout the whole of every issue, I think some of them are very confusing to the point of they don't make sense as issues. And I don't know that I'll enjoy the second issues, which I'm getting and will read, because it doesn't seem like it matters. So while I enjoyed seeing the characters, I don't know that I would just tell anybody, yeah, go out and spend however much this is. I don't even see the price on the cover. Yeah, go out and buy that because it's worth it. It was fun, but it wasn't the greatest thing in the world.
Chad, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that I kind of liked it because I always thought that Ryan Choi got the short end of the sword. When he in the pre-52 universe, and I understand that it was a setup for the Deathstroke Titans, but I thought they just kind of wasted a good character there. So I was glad to see him back.
For me, first of all, there was a Steve Dillon cover, and I'm a huge fan of Steve Dillon's artwork since I discovered him in Preacher. And so, by the way, I just quick aside. When I met Steve Dillon years in the 90s at New York Con, he was doing sketches for free for everybody in line, which was enormously classy. Anyway, and I've heard so much about Tom Pear's Our Man series, which I'm ashamed to say I have yet to read. That's a series I know I really have to read.
Highest possible recommendation, Chris.
Murd, for you to say that, that's enough.
I think it's one of the best series out there that should have been longer.
Then once two men I respect greatly recommend it, then I'm definitely going to read it. So I'm not well versed in the Atom beyond his basic history, so I enjoyed seeing Ray Palmer kind of struggle with himself. That was very interesting. This kept me engaged. So, I wouldn't say run out and buy it, but I would certainly lend it to people. And if someone's a fan of the Atom and Deathstroke, I would definitely recommend it to it. So it was a good read.
Yeah, let's keep this train rolling. Next up will be the Batgirl miniseries. Creative team there is Alyssa Whitney, Rick Leonardi. Rick Leonardi is the penciler, and Mark Pennington is the inker. Shane, what is your rating?
I would give it a buy.
Go ahead, Chad.
Buy.
This is a buy for me too. Yeah.
I just gave it a borrow.
I liked seeing some of my favorite Batman sidekick characters all together interacting, going back and forth. Stephanie Brown as Batgirl, I thought, should have gotten much more time to do that, just as I thought she should have been a lot longer as Robin, and that was very shortchanged. Tim Drake as Red Robin, again, another great series that was only 20 or so issues long. Absolutely fantastic, I thought, series.
That's the Red Robin series.
Yeah, just the Red Robin series.
Yeah.
Fabian Nicieza and Marcus Toe.
Yeah. And, oh my gosh, I forget the other girl's name for Batgirl.
Oh, Cassandra Cain.
Cassandra. I enjoyed her Batgirl series immensely as well. So to see all of them get to interact together in a story, that was just the bee's knees for me on this issue. I was looking forward to this.
And in this issue, it's Batgirl versus the Flashpoint universe, because the Gorilla Grodd is from the Flashpoint series.
That's right. Okay. Why'd you give it a buy, Chad?
again, I just really liked these characters where they had their own books, and it was just great chance to see them on the pages again. And I kind of like how Stephanie Brown just kind of hangs it up, and then she's the one that's chosen and kind of has to get back into the whole feeling of being the fighter.
For me, I like this, like Shane. I really enjoyed the Stephanie Brown character, especially when she was spoiler. I read a good stretch of the Robin series, which had a pretty lengthy run. When she was in it, I remember when she had the baby and all that. I thought those were very good stories. Very engaging. And I always enjoy a story where a character is doubting themselves and sort of their abilities and their potential, and they're put in a situation they're kind of forced to, sort of stand up and recognize that they still have something deep within them that can allow them to meet the challenge. And I enjoy the interaction. I especially enjoyed the scene in the apartment between, Cassandra and Stephanie. I thought that was, and them debating whether or not they should eat their guinea pig or whatever their pet or whatever it is. Yeah, it was. I've always liked Rick Leonardi's art. It was just kind of nice. I haven't seen him do something in a while, at least that I've picked up. Kind of nostalgic to when he was working on the X-Men when I was growing up. So I thought this was very well done. So it's not the most shouting from the hills buy, but I thought it was very good. So I would give it a buy.
Well, first of all, the story is titled "The Love Song of Stephanie Brown," and that's like a T.S. Eliot reference. So Whitney earns a few brownie points from me for that. So and it has already been said, this is the Stephanie Brown Batgirl, who, like you, Chris, I remember her from Chuck Dixon's Robin series, but I think I preferred her, though, as spoiler. I mean, I liked her better in that identity than I ever really did as Batgirl. But I know that this is a fan favorite character. She and Cassandra Cain both, and then Tim Drake too. Really, this is a miniseries that's going to speak very loudly to a certain generation of reader that's a little bit younger than myself, who were all kind of subjected Dan DiDio to something of a mini inquisition after Stephanie Brown was killed years ago. Whenever he made appearances at conventions, people would pepper him with questions about this. But myself, I never really warmed up to this particular group of characters all that much. So, it's a well-told story, and I think the characters are handled well. Stephanie Brown has matured somewhat. She's reached a point where she has come to the conclusion that conflict isn't always necessary, which is portrayed as something of an ironic conclusion, given the nature of the event in which she's appearing, which is all about conflict. People being steel cage matched against one another for the fate of entire universes. Cassandra Cain is also an interesting character. She's a girl who was raised by a master assassin and never taught how to speak a language. Her first language was body language, so as to make her a more effective fighter and assassin, so that her social skills are a tiny bit atrophied, and that comes across very well in Alyssa Whitney's scripts here. Tim Drake, he seems like he's been popping peyote or something, because he seems a bit out of it in the first few scenes. But yeah, it's got some good life under the dome, everyday drama going on for it. It's which is a prominent element of several of the miniseries that I liked that came out under the whole Convergence aegis. And we saw, as Chad told us, a couple of Flashpoint characters, the Flashpoint version of Catman and also of Gorilla Grodd. Interesting opponents they'll make. And we even got a Killer Moth cameo, all of which is nice. But these are characters that don't really have their hooks in me so deeply. So it didn't grab me, as we like to say here on the show. And Chris, I must respectfully disagree with you about Rick Leonardi's art. I never did like it in the 80s and 90s, and I don't like it anymore right now.
Fair enough, brother.
So yeah, it's well enough told, and it's going to be a good thing for a lot of people out there who were fans of these younger members of the Bat family. They're going to want to buy this up right away, but myself, I only gave it a borrow. Next up is Batman and Robin. Creative team there is writer Ron Mars, penciler Dennis Cowan, and inks by Klaus Janson. Chad, let's start with you this time. What's your rating going to be?
I'm going to have to say borrow.
Comrades in arms, I did not read that one, so I'll excuse myself.
All right, that will be an NA from Chris. And from me, it is a pants.
I give it a low bar.
All right, Chad, what remarks do you have?
I don't know. It's just, I mean, I enjoyed the whole Bruce Wayne and Damian thing, but I don't know. It just didn't feel right to me. The whole dialogue and between the two of them.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I do believe I see your point.
I enjoyed the like Chad. I enjoyed the interaction between Bruce and Damian, and I even liked that Jason came in to kind of help save the day a little bit. But I do think the story itself for the issue did feel very, very forced. It just didn't seem to flow very well. I was looking forward to it because of the Bruce and Damian dynamic. It just didn't quite live up to what I was hoping for.
And again, the bad guys or whoever they're fighting are the extremists, and I really don't know a lot about them, so I don't know if I have a lot invested in, if that, those characters win or lose.
Yeah. Now, the joke with them is that they're supposed to be alternate reality versions of, like, Marvel Universe supervillains. Yeah, that's, they were Justice League opponents from the Blah-Ha-Ha era, weren't they, Shane?
I believe they were.
Murd, what's your take on it?
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I agree with Chad that the dialogue doesn't seem quite right. I mean, this is written by Ron Mars, who's he's a name I've learned to respect. I mean, he wrote The Silver Surfer for Marvel years ago. He wrote the Kyle Rayner Green Lantern series for DC. He's nearly the equal of another one of my favorite writers, Chuck Dixon, in writing punchy dialogue and brisk-paced action. I mean, we get a lot of each in the first issue of this Batman and Robin mini. But Mars's skill in characterization, which is certainly existent, here and elsewhere in the Convergence event, appears compromised by apathy. I just don't think his heart is in this event. It is just a paycheck to him, and he's just sort of phoning it in. He turns in a few good lines of Penguin dialogue, but just about everybody else in this issue is very spotty. I mean, the tension, the outright rancor between Batman and Damian, as Shane said, it feels quite forced. Batman expecting emotional sensitivity from Damian. After the fight, he turns to Damian and goes, "I'm fine, thanks for asking." I don't think that's anything that Batman would ever expect from any of his Robins, least of all this one. And Poison Ivy actually being grateful to Batman after the fight's over, it's a lot of this stuff just does not ring true. And the whole, the sort of tension between Bruce and Damian over the rearrival of Jason Todd in town. I kind of thought they'd already aired all that out during Grant Morrison's Batman and Robin series, so having it rehashed here doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So it's just kind of a pointless little melodrama, drenched in equally pointless conflict, and the characterization is badly off, and this is just something that I do not need to be reading, so I give it a flat-out pass.
Murd, that was eloquently devastating.
My thanks, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
One other point is that version of Jason Todd only appeared for, a few issues anyway, and I never really liked, that version of him anyway. It just, even when Grant Morrison wrote it, it kind of felt, I don't know, out of place.
Yeah, I see your point there, too. Yes, especially since we got a better version of Jason Todd before and after that. So bringing it back here, I don't really see the point either. All right, next up will be the Harley Quinn miniseries. This is written by Steve Pugh, who also provided the cover art. Interior art is by Phil Winslade, with inks by John Dell. And let's see, Chris, I think it's your time to go first.
I'm an NA on this one too, brother.
Okay, in that case, it's back to me. I give Harley Quinn a bye.
I agree. I'll go bye. Mainly because it has the Captain Carrot universe.
I also give it a bye. That was a lot of fun.
All right, good. And hopefully Shauna Kelly will agree that this is worthy of a bye because she's the biggest Harley Quinn fan we know. All right, a bit of a warning in advance. This is not quite as zany, silly, or even funny as you might expect from a Harley Quinn one-shot, but although there are still a few solid chuckles to be found here, a few funny moments. But this is, on the whole, kind of a more sedate, if not sedated, Harley Quinn than we're accustomed to seeing. So this is Harley after the dome has fallen, and she's been rehabilitated a little bit. And she's actually on some medication. She's had some therapy, and she's settled down and set up housekeeping with a very nice, good, wholesome rebound guy. He's a police officer, actually, the same one who was in the process of arresting her when the dome fell over her version of Gotham. And his name is Officer Louis Dana, and he's, to me at least, an immediately likable character. A good guy, a good straight man for Harley, really. So seeing the two of them together there, it kind of made me think of like an 80s romantic drama/comedy series. This lunatic ex-supervillainess and her hot cop boyfriend. It's almost like moonlighting. And then, of course, the necessary element of conflict is introduced, and we discover that Harley is going to be going up against Captain Carrot, and I absolutely agree with Chad that that's a stroke of genius. I cannot wait for the second issue to see how that pans out. But on the downside of that is that Harley must sacrifice her domestic bliss to go forth, and she needs to become crazy again. And so Catwoman and Poison Ivy, as the supporting characters here, they're like Paulies to Harley's Rocky. They need to drag her back to Clown Town and get her all suited up again to go fight this giant bunny for the sake of the universe. So there's some... Pew seems to be saving the quality craziness for the second issue. So once again, this is one of those cases when I think perhaps the second issue might actually top the first. But I still enjoy the story that was turned in here. Steve Pugh, as I said, does work some good humor in here, although he tones it down a bit for this first issue. I've been a fan of Phil Winslade's art for about 15 years. His stuff looks great here, especially the Dick Sprang-style Joker hallucinations that Harley experiences several times during the issue, which brings to mind the way the Dodsons would portray Harley's view of the world in her own ongoing series back in the early 2000s. And Chris Chuckry's vivid colors are a good complement to all of that. And in general, it's just kind of nice to see Harley wearing her old costume and not dressed like a funhouse whore, as she is so often in New 52. So, yes, it's good, goofy fun, and not too goofy, though. And there's also some somewhat realistic drama going on here for contrast. So, yeah, this I do give this a buy, and all the more so for the second issue when Captain Carrot will show up.
That's part of what I liked about this issue, is that she was in her good old-fashioned costume. I like Poison Ivy and Catwoman coming in because the three of them, at least Harley and Poison Ivy, pal around a lot through the cartoon and the different comics and stuff. And to add Catwoman gave it a Gotham City Sirens feel to it.
Oh, yeah.
Which I love that series as well. To see her be kind of calmed down and normal was a lot of fun. And I just enjoyed the issue. It was good.
I think my favorite line of the whole book is when it's like the fourth page, she has the big mallet, and then they lose all their powers once the dome goes, and she starts to fall back and goes, how comes I never noticed this thing weighs like 100 tons before? And a couple pages before, she's just swinging it with one hand.
Yeah,
that was one of my favorite lines of the whole book.
Actually, comrades, I just read it. I concur with you wholeheartedly. This is very much a buy. In fact, this is one of the best of the miniseries I've read out of this whole event. I love Phil Winslade's art. I've always enjoyed his art thoroughly. And just what works so well in this issue is the whole relationship they established between Harley and the police officer whose skull she was about to annihilate with a mallet. And just when they're both laying there when the dome is formed, and they just go, wow, okay. And, they go from there, and you guys, I agree 100%, just to kind of capture the whole Gotham Sirens feel. This is a very well executed. See, this is what a miniseries should do. This grabs you right away. I like Murd. I love seeing the old costume because I can't stand the new one, and as much because I can't stand much of the new 52 in general. So this is very well done, very entertaining, and kind of poignant in a way, because at the end you see, she was making it in her domestic situation with the police officer, and now, at the end, and you have to wonder what's going to happen to the cop. So I'll definitely look forward to reading number 2. Definitely a buy.
I think that brings us around then to our next offering. This is the Justice League. No of America, no international, just Justice League. It's written by Frank Thierry, art by Vicente Cifuentes. Shane, I think we'll be hearing your rating first this time.
I would give it a very high borrow.
Go ahead, Chad.
Chad?
I'll go high borrow also.
I give this a buy.
I think I'm going to skew more like a low borrow on this one.
I like that it featured the women cast of the Justice League. I find it, like so many of these issues, I find it odd that so many people just happen to be in the same city as everything else, which drove me nuts as I read more and more of them. I was kind of thinking it would be more specific to their own cities and journeys.
May I jump in for a second?
Go right ahead.
Did we mention the whole thing about the domes and the cities? Did we mention what the whole reason for these domes are? Because I'm not sure if we did. I'm a little lost here.
I don't think we did.
Okay. May I?
Go right ahead.
Please.
Go for it, my friend.
All right. So Brainiac, the Uber Brainiac, the cosmic Brainiac, has been collecting these things in much the same way that the pre-crisis Brainiac used to collect cities in little tiny bottles. This one has been grabbing cities out of different, as representative samples of different realities, different points in time and space, and gathering them all together on this little barren rock of a planet outside the space-time continuum, which is called Telos, and which is presided over by this entity that's also called Telos, which we think at the beginning is some kind of artificial intelligence, but later it's revealed that there's a lot more to his origin than we think. But anyway, he is just assigned to be like the maintenance program for all of these captive cities. He's just supposed to take care of them, but after his little encounter with Superman in Convergence number 0, he decides that Brainiac's true intent must be for him to pit all of these captive cities against one another, choose representative champions from all of them to fight one another to determine their worth to survive, and the winner of this grand tournament will then have his or her representative city and representative timeline, parallel Earth, whatever, brought into the New 52 multiverse and given new life there under the auspices of Telos and Brainiac. So that is what's going on with all of these captive cities and captive heroes.
Okay.
Or, ladies and gentlemen, for a variation, I just go back to 1984 and Secret Wars from Marvel. Anyway, proceed.
Oh, and I think maybe it should also be mentioned that this first week of books, I believe, all take place in Gotham City, or Gotham City.
Right. And then the next wave are all in pre-Zero Hour Metropolis, and then after that it's pre-crisis Gotham City again, and then the last wave is kind of all over the place. Most of them take place on parallel Earths from the old pre-crisis multiverse.
Okay. I just wasn't exactly sure if we'd mentioned that. I mean, we probably all knew amongst ourselves what was going on, but just want to make sure the listeners get out there and, you understand where we're coming from there. And I'm sorry I didn't mean to add more time to this already long episode, but I want to get that out there.
We did what needed to be done, Brian, and we thank you for it.
So, wow, we're on issue 5 of 40. Oh,
That's
boy.
right.
Step it up.
1/8 of the way in.
The only other thing I'll say is part of the middle of the story got a little confusing to me, figuring out who was who and where they were talking at. They were in a club. They were doing some battles. But overall, I enjoyed the issue enough that if someone said, hey, what's this Justice League one like? Yeah, there's others in this series that I like better, but this one you could read. Here's my copy.
Well, most of them are blonde.
Yeah.
Now, I have, maybe it's just, maybe wishful thinking, but the prisoner that the Flashpoint Aquaman kind of kills for saying Mare's name kind of looks like Commandy of the Flashpoint. I don't know. Maybe it's just wishful thinking or,
Yeah.
Now, that could be. I mean, that's very possible. Do you have anything else to say about this, Chad? Or?
Oh, no. I mean, I don't think that the Flashpoint characters, came off like they were. I mean, I kind of enjoyed parts of Flashpoint, and I don't know if, again, having the female characters, worked for me, but maybe it was just a, chance for the to draw some TNA.
I enjoyed this because I liked the combination of characters they put together here. I've always been very intrigued by Zatanna. Mara's always been a very interesting character to me, and so I enjoyed seeing them at Vixen. It's all interesting characters. Granted, yes, they're all gorgeous, and that certainly doesn't hurt from an artistic standpoint. I like the idea of them visiting the hospital for the pregnancy. It was an enjoyable read. What I really liked about it, though, was the Flashpoint story. When they came out, I really wanted to see more of the Aquaman versus Wonder Woman war that was going on and all of that, because I found those characters very interesting because they were so horrifying in so many ways. And so I'm intrigued to see where they're going to go now that they've introduced the heroic Mara to the tyrannical Aquaman. So that definitely intrigued me, whereas this is one of the second issues I'm going to read. So in a series of miniseries that I just think are all over the place in terms of just quality or just in terms of engaging me, that this one was one of the ones that was more at the higher end of the pile, so to speak. So there you go.
And to that point, I probably would have enjoyed more of the Flashpoint universe instead of the New 52 stuff.
I agree with that, sir. Yep. Murd, go ahead.
Okay. Well, this is kind of a fun story in a splashy style over substance, like late '90s Wildstorm sort of way. It's like a gooey little cheesecake bite of a comic. To me, it seems. I mean, Chris is absolutely right that there are some interesting characters thrown together here. United by the simple fact that they happen to be women. At least Thierry does give us some justification for, that Shane points out, and we'll be pointing it out several times over the course of this extended discussion. I'm sure it does strain credibility a bit that all these different characters just happen to be in whatever city gets domed at a given time. But we're told that all these ladies were in town for like a baby shower, like a destination baby shower for Jesse Quick, who is having a baby who is named Johnny. And we get to see Congarilla taking care of baby Johnny in this issue, which is good for a laugh. But on the main, though, interesting as those characters may be, they're not here because they're interesting so much as because they are female and gorgeous, as has been pointed out. So it's really more titillation than story going on here. Then we've got the whole Flashpoint Aquaman thing, who is probably one of the more interesting characters to come out of that particular iteration of DC reality. And the whole thing's well drawn by Vicente Cifuentes. He draws the ladies very well, although the colors by Monica Kubina make everybody look like they're wearing too much makeup. Just a personal opinion there. The giant demon cephalopod thing that everybody has to fight for like 2 panels was very well rendered as well. And I'm sure that the next issue is going to contain what is probably going to be one of the biggest battles in the entire Convergence event. These female Justice Leaguers going up against the marshaled forces of Flashpoint Atlantis. That could be something to see. But this first issue, like I said, just kind of jiggly fun, as nearly as I can tell. So I give it a borrow, and not the strongest borrow at that. All right, and that pulls us back around to our 6th selection. This is Nightwing and Oracle, written by the redoubtable Gail Simone, pencils by Jan Duursema, and inks by Dan Parsons. Chad, I think it's your turn to go first.
Bye.
Very much a bye for me as well.
And for me as well. Bye.
And me.
All right, unanimous.
Chad, go ahead.
Oh, I think Gail Simone just captures, is probably the only person that should be allowed to write Barbara Gordon, and I like how Mr. Freeze just kind of gives up because it's just going to happen again. And the only problem I guess I had was, and maybe this is a nitpick, but Nightwing's costume looks more like the new 52 version rather than the sleek version that he kind of wore, in the pre-52 stuff. And this probably has the best cliffhanger at the end where, you have Oracle going, I started fighting 10 minutes ago. Because that's what I would expect from her.
I'm sorry, Shane. Go ahead.
No, I was going to agree. I think that's a great point with Oracle being the way she was written and portrayed back then. She was ahead of the curve on everybody. She was the information networked person through all of the superhero-dom, and could pretty much take care of anybody with the click of a button. Fun to see Corey in there a little bit, although I wasn't sure what was going on there at first. But yeah, just to see these two characters together and interacting the way they were, it makes me long for brighter days when I loved both Birds of Prey series and Nightwing series.
I echo Shane and Chad's sentiments to a T because, again, I agree. Gail Simone, especially when it comes to Barbara Gordon and Nightwing, is one of the top writers, I think, in the history of those characters. And when you think of the wonderful work she did on books like Birds of Prey, this book, it was almost like an ache to read this because it just reminded me of all the things I now miss in DC. And I just thought it was well executed all around, and I can't say anything more than my august and esteemed colleagues have already said. Definitely a buy.
Yes, and let me just once again complete the circle of unanimity here in saying that nobody writes a character like Barbara Gordon than like Gail Simone does. I mean, she's once again reminding us why Barbara Gordon is one of the cleverest people in any DC universe. And Chad, it's absolutely correct, that ending. I started fighting them 10 minutes ago, totally Barbara, and it's kind of reminiscent of that shocking reveal with Ozymandias in Watchmen. You know, I go, what do you think I am, some movie serial villain? I did it 20 minutes ago. It's on that level. You know, she writes Barbara in general very well. She's like the main character of this issue, really. She's the narrator of everything that happens. So Oracle and Nightwing might actually have been a better title. Though, you know, the sad thing is, I suspect Simone probably had to push pretty hard just to get Oracle's name added to the title at all. You know, just look at some of the other things that we're seeing in this Brace of Convergence miniseries. Why is it just Hawkman instead of Hawkman and Hawkwoman? Why is it Adventures of Superman when Supergirl is really a more important character in that story?
That's a good point, Mark. Good point.
Yeah, she lobbied and she succeeded because this is really more an Oracle story than it is a Nightwing story. But her incisiveness as a judge of character and as an analyst of human behavior is as sharp as ever. In one sentence in this issue, she nails a pretty key distinction between herself, Batman, and Nightwing. So she knows whereof she speaks. I agree with Shane that it was cool to see Starfire thrown in there as the other woman, you know, the platonic other woman, since, you know, Starfire, along with her fellow Titans, was also under the dome in pre-Flashpoint Gotham City, and Simone makes use of that to have a little scene between those two. Simone does some cool background stuff with the life in the dome situation, and she also, as is one of her greatest strengths as a writer, she digs up some cunning, vicious, alternate reality opponents, you know, really good, inventive villains who aren't afraid to bend the rules of the game that Telos has everybody playing. So those two Wild West hawks, that they're going to be good, you know, bloodthirsty and ruthless opponents for Nightwing and Oracle, and I can't wait to see what Barbara has worked out to neutralize them. So, yeah, this was great, and it was a great writer writing a character for which he has a very strong affinity. Nobody should miss it. Bye. All right, and this brings us to something else that I know, Chris, you were especially looking forward to, The Question.
Yes.
This is written by Greg Rucka, and the artwork is provided by Cully Hamner. So, Chris, why don't you give your rating first this time?
Oh, it's a buy.
It's a buy for, actually for me it's more of a buy-RO.
Fair enough.
I'll give it a buy.
Buy.
I think back. This is one of the miniseries I was most excited for because I loved when Rucka was writing in the Bat universe, and he was developing Montoya as the Question and her, shall we say, interesting relationship with Two-Face, and you know. Rucka basically picks up where he left off, and I was just thrilled to read an aspect of DC history, the DC multiverse that I really miss. And you know, he really captured Montoya's ongoing sort of struggles as the Question, and that all the dynamic with Two-Face and so forth. And again, Greg Rucka is one of the top writers in comics, so it was just a delight to see him working on characters that he really, I think, put a strong stamp on. And I've really enjoyed He Does the Question, because I can't really stand the whole Steve Ditko, whatever objectivist stuff he does with the characters. So it was refreshing to read this. I highly recommend it. Definitely a buy.
Right. Well, yeah, this one's got. You can tell that this is Rucka writing it, because he kind of ducks some of the more cosmic conflict angles that a lot of these other miniseries are taking, and gives us instead gritty urban survivalist drama, in a way that I don't think that any of the other minis attempted to. He brings this thing right down to the street level, which is where his strengths lie. So, and I give a big thank you to him also for coming right out with the the elephant in the room, the eminent similarity between what's happening with Gotham here in the Dome scenario and what happened to Gotham in No Man's Land. This is not the first time this Gotham has gone through this sort of situation where they're having to fend for themselves, isolated from the rest of the world. So yeah, he directly addresses that. There's kind of an entertaining first-person narration we get from Montoya as the question, and a lot of the dialogue boxes are indeed asking rhetorical questions of the reader as we follow Harvey Dent through, Harvey Dent Vigilante. This is one of the more interesting takes on Two-Face I think we've ever seen in any comic, any place really, as he runs around and he's actually doing good. I love the way that Hamner draws Two-Face too. That crooked spiral he's got for an iris in one of his eyes, and we learn that Two-Face, the bad Harvey side of Two-Face, doesn't grow a beard very well too. So yeah, the artwork is kind of cool in that respect, and I like that Hamner did a little bit of research and found some reference for like an urban pharmacy to make the opening sequence seem that much more believable. And then eventually we get down to just, as Chris put it, the interesting relationship between Harvey and the question. And a lot of it is just the two of them in kind of a bit of a standoff, as Harvey is bent on using his coin, which keeps failing him, to commit suicide, and the question is just there trying to talk him down off the ledge. And eventually Harvey, when Telos gives his Citizens of My World speech, and Harvey races off into the night to find his otherworld duplicate. It makes perfect sense that Two-Face, given the opportunity to meet a double of himself from another universe, would jump at that chance. Yeah, he's really more of the star of this issue than was the question herself. He kind of upstages her. She doesn't really do all that much except sit around. We get a couple of good guest appearances out of the Huntress and Kate Kane showing up on the last page, so there'll be some sparks struck in the second issue as a result of that. I think the one thing that kept me from making this just an out-and-out buy, I would have liked to see, as I said, this is really more about Two-Face than it is about the question. Rucka really could have done a little bit more with Montoya herself. I mean, it's not like he did nothing with her. I mean, we see her, we know she's worried about her father, who's in the hospital, and since they're cut off from the outside world, there aren't very many medications available to give him the help he needs. She's worried about that whole Mark of Cain thing showing up on her head again, which is a bit of a continuity of holdover from the pre-Flashpoint days. But on the whole, she does come off as a little bit of a cipher to me. So maybe a little more insight would have helped a bit. And also, this is totally a design nitpick, but I wish they had given her a distinctive cover logo instead of just recycling the one from the Vic Sage, Denny O'Neil question series of the 80s. Yeah, they could have given a more distinctive cover logo to this. But yeah, it's as Chris has already said, this is a great writer going back to a character on which he put his stamp, and probably worthy of your attention. So, very nearly a buy.
And I agree with everything that's already been said.
I do too. I enjoyed seeing all these characters back together again. It was some of the best characters that came out of 52 through the Crime Bible miniseries, and hoping to see more of them, and I got it here.
All right, let's keep motoring ahead here. All right, next will be the Speed Force miniseries. This is written by Tony Bedard, pencils by Tom Grummett, inks by Sean Parsons, colors by Rain Barredo. This one is a big buy from me.
I'd give this a buy as well.
I'll go with a big buy also.
I'm NA. I did not read this one.
Oh, well. we're going to tell you why you should have, Chris.
Terrific, sir.
All
Terrific.
right. All right. Now, first off, this is written by Tony Bedard, who is another one of those unsung heroes of the comics writing world. I mean, you can tell that first of all, that this was written by a guy who used to be an editor, as indeed Tony Bedard once was, who's had to coordinate this kind of 300-ring circus before. The Bedard has pretty clearly checked in with the editor / editors and or some of the other writers to make sure that this Flash tale of his and some of the other, because he wrote a few of these Convergence miniseries that he wrote, unfolds not in a vacuum but well in sync with the other chapters going on at the same time. You know, he having been an editor, he knows how to make these things dovetail. Also, not for nothing, he was the writer of Exiles for a good long time, so he knows how to very quickly and engagingly develop from nothing alternate realities and introduce his little cast of characters and make the reader care about the whole thing in a big hurry. And this is an interesting sample of a Convergence miniseries in that the main character is not restricted to just his own domed city. Once the dome lifts, he has his super speed back, and he can make use of this enhanced mobility to zip around the other domed cities and check things out. So as a result, we get not only Gotham pre-Flashpoint, we also get, through the eyes of Wally, views of lots of other fun little parallelers flying around. You know, there's a quick little panel in Bizarro World, for example. We got to see pre-crisis Krypton, Quard, the Freedom Fighters, and of course what may be the greatest guest appearance of. Well, no, I take that back. That's coming. The greatest guest appearance of the whole event is coming up in Supergirl Matrix. But the runner-up here is when Flash meets Fastback of the Amazing Zoo crew. That was sheer genius. So it's good in general just to see Wally. The old Wally, who I know is a favorite character of a lot of people, less happy about his kids tagging along, though. I kind of wish that he had left them at home with Linda. And it's just, maybe if they were able to travel under their own power, I would find them less annoying. But the fact that they're just kind of tumbling along like helpless little rag dolls in Wally's speed wake as he runs around, it's just something about that just annoys me to no end. Little tag-along twins. But anyway, it's just cool that Wally is one of those characters who absolutely refuses to give up. You know, a lot of the other characters under the domes, and this is, I think, one of the flaws of the series, they're a little too quick to just throw up their hands and sink down into complacency. Just go about their business, try to defend the citizenry from themselves during their time under the dome, instead of working tirelessly to find a solution. Wally is not one of these. You see him just standing there with a pick, like a big rock pick, trying to completely futilely to work at the dome, and then that's just an indicator of that's Wally's personality, and then Bedard gets that, and I'm glad that he chose to wrote the character in that way. So it's good to have Wally back and to see him there, and the way Bedard gives us glimpses of different. We get to see what's going to happen to all these different realities when they lose their little battles. The fact that Wally is present at the site of the Justice Riders reality after they lost their battle with those Hawk characters in the Nightwing and Oracle one-shot. So that's kind of an important that adds something important to the whole event, that we see that if one of these cities loses their battle, the whole thing crumbles away into dust, and all the people in it will crumble away with it. So it's really a chilling visual. It's like Crisis on Infinite Earths worthy. And all of this brought to us by Tom Grummett's artwork, and he is one of my favorite pencilers. He did Thunderbolts for a time, and I really loved his artwork on the Superboy miniseries at DC during the 90s, although I do have to say that the inker and colorist he's paired with here have kind of doused his artwork in mediocrity a little bit. It's not quite as good as those of you who know what I'm talking about when it comes to Tom Grummett's artwork may be expecting, just as a little warning there. But on the whole, this is one of the more original and creative and imaginative miniseries we've seen in this event so far, and I give it an enthusiastic buy.
Mert, that's really interesting that we got to go through all the rest of the little cities and see these panels of different things that really don't show up in most of the rest of the number ones that go through this first month. I loved seeing the twins there. I was annoyed that all they did was get drug along in his wake. But the rest of it was a lot of fun to see. And of course, it was just great to see good old-fashioned Wally West, who really is my Flash all those years reading Wally West as Flash just blew me away.
I agree. I think the meeting with Fastback, and then as he's running through the Captain Carrot universe, and they go, "Look, a living cartoon." I don't know. It was just a fun, and again, I agree that I enjoyed seeing all the different, I guess, dome cities, and how they are going to, perish if they lose. And it's also nice to see that the Future's End universe was getting beat up.
Okay, next up is Superman. Okay, this was written by Dan Jurgens, and the artwork is by Lee Weeks. Shane, you're up.
I'm actually going to give this one a buy.
I'll go low buy.
Oh, very strong buy for me.
I gave it a pants.
Wow, all right.
I'm standing alone here. I know there were a few people on the forums who agree with you guys more than with me. But begin making your case then. Shane?
Well, here's what I liked. I thought it was pretty well written. I thought the art was phenomenal in it, which isn't true of some of them as we continue to plow through and march on. I thought the story was interesting. I couldn't figure out because I read these all out of order from how we're going through them. And to see Superman and Lois with a pregnant Lois really threw me away because I couldn't figure out a time when there would have been a pregnant Lois. I thought that aspect was really interesting, that now they were able to do it. The only thing that I would have wondered is why didn't it happen during 52, because he, again, had lost his powers back then, going through the Red Sun. So he was more or less normal then, too. I just thought it was a good, well-rounded, fun issue focusing on Superman and Lois, and I even liked Superman being the Batman-esque vigilante in the beginning. It was a lot of fun to read.
I think I liked the way they had the Flashpoint Superman kind of revealing himself to the Lois Lane better than I did in the other one where Aquaman and Mara.
And I'll say the Flashpoint Superman was a lot creepier than what I thought he would be for that.
Yeah.
I enjoyed this thoroughly. First of all, I think I speak for all of us. We're all big fans of Lee Weeks' artwork, and I hadn't seen his artwork in a while in a current book, and this I think the artwork in this book is gorgeous, beautifully rendered. I'm thinking of the scene again, as Shane mentioned. There's no page numbers here, but where Superman is embracing and kissing the pregnant Lois. It's just beautiful. And what I really enjoyed about it, again, Jurgens is a top-notch writer who's written Superman. He's written so many of these characters before. He knows them inside and out. And I just really enjoyed the interactions between Clark and Lois, the way they spoke to each other. Extremely well done. And again, I'm interested in the Flashpoint characters and their worlds. I was interested to see them being brought into it. And just again, I thought it was a very strong opening to a two-part miniseries. Excuse me. And again, I find that all these books are very uneven. Some capture more than others. This is one, though, that when I read it, I put it down again. I really enjoyed this. I'm looking forward to issue 2, and I can't say that for all of these. So it's a buy.
I think that the get up that Superman's wearing at the beginning, did he kind of wear that when he came back from the dead for a short time? I vaguely remember that.
I don't recall.
When he came back from being, quote, dead, it was a very black outfit with a silver or white Superman symbol embossed on the front. Kind of almost burial robe-esque, but it wasn't a robe, it was a jumpsuit. But I don't remember him wearing just the black garb that was in here. That's the closest thing that I remember him wearing, black-wise.
Yes, and I apologize to you gentlemen that owing to a glitch in the phone system, I was unable to hear most of what you guys had to say about Superman. So I'm afraid I must remain unconvinced as to your reasons why you thought this was a very good issue. But for me, Oh, all right, let me just say that it does open strong. Okay, I like the opening sequence where we have Lois and Clark doing their little Batman and Oracle riff. You know, it's Superman as the masked vigilante here. You know, he's the Batman of the Bottle City once again. This is harkening back to his Silver Age days playing Nightwing and Flamebird with Jimmy Olsen in Kandor. So that was fun to see. It's kind of like a classy, upbeat poke at DC's attempts to make Superman and as many other of their characters as possible more like Batman. But this strong setup is sadly brief. It lasts all of like the first 3-4 pages. Then suddenly the dome goes up, Superman's powers go back, and to this observer, the rigor mortis sets in the story. Because the rest of the issue unfolds in what I would describe as a rigid, talky, blandly expository, told not shown kind of style, and which is rough even for Jurgens. And you know, Jurgens, I think of him as kind of a solid, middle-of-the-road sort of writer. He's turned in some good, entertaining scripts in his time, but he's also turned in plenty of stinkers. And as scripters go, he tends to be a tiny bit stiff, even under the best of circumstances. And this, to me, is not the best of circumstances. So probably the worst offender in the whole thing is Jimmy Olsen, who's written just about as obnoxiously as I've ever seen the character handled. I couldn't even really care that much about Lois being pregnant, and then suddenly Superman finds himself on a collision course with characters from the Flashpoint reality, and my apologies to Chad, who sounds like he enjoyed the Flashpoint universe more than I did, but they're one of the least interesting realities involved in the Convergence event for my money. So that didn't help my opinion of this whole thing either. On the bright side, Lee Weeks remains a fine, dramatic visual storyteller, and there's some great shots of bodies in flight drawn in this Superman issue. So let me stress that the pants that I issue to this issue is not the fault of Lee Weeks at all. It's really pretty much all on Jurgens. And I know that you guys must have liked this, and some of the folks on the forum were gushing about it also, but to me, it's just kind of a clinker and not very well scripted, and in fact, poorly scripted. And I do stand by my pants. All right, having gotten that out of my system, let us move on to the last comic in the first wave of 4 of these Convergence miniseries, and that'll be The Titans, which is written by Fabian Nicieza, the pencils by Ron Wagner, and inks by Jose Marzan Jr., colors by Chris Sotomayor. And I've lost track of who's going first here, but I think it's Chad's turn.
Ooh, probably a high borrow, low buy.
I'm an NA on this one, gentlemen.
Okay. Well, I agree with Chad. High borrow, low buy.
I'm just going to borrow.
For this one, the voices of some of the characters just seemed off. I mean, I think it's kind of, cool, what they did with Roy and his non-gadgety arm. It didn't ring true for me from what I liked about the Titans.
That's kind of how I felt about it, too. It just didn't seem to have the same voice that first Titans series had, especially that first year or two when I was really reading. It was Devin Grayson's run of the Titans, if I remember right.
It was, yeah.
I like that they tried to give Arsenal some second chance with his daughter, given what happened to her in pre-whatever universes. But it just didn't seem... It seemed a lot of forced topics crammed into one issue.
All right, well, I'm hearing what you guys are saying about how this doesn't quite measure up to the Devin K. Grayson run on the Titans, which was excellent. I think we all agreed on that. But unfortunately, they can't go back to that specific point in history because this is... that would put this kind of out of sync with... the point in the DC pre-Flashpoint timeline where from which this Gotham City is said to have been abducted. We couldn't go all the way back there. So we're dealing with a later version of these characters who've gone through a lot more crap in their lives, and Roy Harper in particular. That's an important thing I wanted to say about this. Fabian Nicieza went on record in an interview I read months ago that his number one goal in writing this issue, besides the paycheck, was to get a little bit of redemption for Roy Harper. If you look at the title of this issue is Try for Justice, which is a pretty definite bust on James Robinson's JLA Cry for Justice. And that is where a lot of bad stuff was dumped on Roy Harper in that miniseries and in years following. And so Fabian Nicieza wanted to try to write Roy Harper out of that hole. Whether he succeeds or not, it's kind of open to debate. But he does at least, dig into Roy's character and his history, and does so pretty well, I think, personally. It's definitely a Roy story. It's really more of an Arsenal or Red Arrow or whatever he's calling himself here story than it is a Titans story. Donna and Donna Troy and Starfire are present. They're the other two Titans making up the titular team, but they don't get that much to do in this issue. But it is all the same, though. Very nice to see, between this issue and Nightwing and Oracle, this version of Corey. It's the wide-eyed, joyous Starfire instead of the jaded alien nymphomaniac that we get from New 52. So, and Nicieza does throw in a few glimpses of life under the dome, which is always nice, and this business going on with Roy's cybernetic arm, and the fact that that's another fact of Convergence that's kind of inconsistently portrayed depending on who's writing. Sometimes cybernetics work, and sometimes they don't. But in this particular miniseries, cybernetics count as superpowers, and they do not function underneath the dome. And so that's why Roy Harper is kind of out of action as a hero as this story begins. And then we get the inevitable fight sequence with the extremists. We mentioned them earlier. They're doppelgangers of Marvel's supervillains who are put together into this world-conquering mini-army. And they're used pretty well by Fad Nick in this story, I think. Dream Slayer in particular, and in the cliffhanger, the astonishing choice that's given to Roy here at the end. Betray his friends, and he will be given his heart's desire. He might actually get his daughter Leanne back. And gosh, I totally feel Nicieza's desire to redeem Roy there and give him his daughter back, because it happens entirely too often in superhero comics that writers just don't feel like dealing with children, and so either artificially age them or kill them off at their first opportunity. And I was terribly disappointed to find out that this was done to poor Leanne Harper. And here comes Fabian Nicieza in this miniseries, in this weird little pocket of reality that doesn't entirely count, but they're trying in some small and largely symbolic way to give some real justice, to try for justice for Roy Harper in this series. It's just a nice gesture that he's making here, and I'm all in favor of it. Plus the fact that Nicieza is a very good and solid scripter who knows how to work with DC history. I know we mentioned him as the writer of that Red Robin series that Shane and I both liked. Well, he put his heart and soul into this one, and like I said, the results are still kind of mixed. The jury's still out. We'll have to read the second issue to find out how thorough and effective a job he does in redeeming Roy Harper from all the bad things that were done to him pre-Flashpoint. But if you're any kind of a Roy Harper fan, you should probably pick up this issue and check it out. The artwork by Ron Wagner doesn't hurt either. It's the closest thing I can compare it to is Phil Hester's work. And there's also some pretty cool color effects from our friend Soto on the first few pages. There's kind of like a flashback sequence of all the things that Roy Harper has been through from his early days with the Titans, right on up through like the loss of his arm and the death of his daughter. And those color effects by Sotomayor help to make it look like the flashback sequence it is. So yeah, I think I'll call this one a buy, Aro.
All right. Well, that ends the first week of the Convergence titles. Chris, unfortunately, must depart before we go to week 2. But Chris, for week 2, are there any standouts you'd like to talk about at all briefly before you take your leave?
Which are the ones in week 2? Because I'm not sure.
Sure. This is Aquaman,
yes,
Batman, Shadow of the Bat, Catwoman, Green Arrow, Green Lantern Parallax, Justice League International, Suicide Squad, Superboy, Supergirl Matrix, and Superman the Man of Steel.
I didn't read all those. The ones I did read, I enjoyed the Green Arrow because I was really engaged by the interaction with his son at a period in Green Arrow's history where he was in a state where he was not comfortable actually taking sort of responsibility for his son. So that I thought that I enjoyed. Catwoman also. I've always been a fan of Justin Gray. I think he's a very solid scribe. And it was just fun seeing Catwoman do her thing, trying to take on Intergang. It was just nothing world-shattering, but just a good, fun Catwoman adventure. So that's what I would say there. There are other books I would like to comment on, but those are weeks we're not going to address yet, because I thought there were some other books in the third and fourth wave that were exceptional. A couple in particular. But maybe we'll talk about those in the future if we can summon the energy to continue to wade through Convergence. But, gentlemen, as always, this was an absolute honor. And I will go slog through the trenches with you anytime.
All right, Chris.
I'll take you up on that, Chris.
Take care.
Absolutely. And Chad, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
You got it. Take care, gentlemen. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
All right.
See ya.
Good night, sir.
All right.
Good night.
Well, we're going to call an audible on this episode because we've had some difficulties with the equipment and also running a little bit long. So we're going to go through week 2, those issues I just mentioned, and then we'll somehow revisit weeks 3 and 4 at a later date. But for right now, Mert, I turn it back to you for week 2, the pre-Zero Hour characters.
As Chris would say, honored, sir. All right, we begin with the Aquaman miniseries. This is written by Tony Bedard, and the art is by Cliff Richards, colors by John Rauch. I think it's my turn to go first now since Chris has left us. This is a buy for me, definitely.
This is a borrow for me.
I'll go with a low buy.
All right. Now this is Tony Bedard wrote this one too, and he also wrote that Speed Force one in the last wave that I liked so much. Now, the second time, Bedard manages to impress me with the breadth of consideration he's given to this entire premise and the space that his assigned book occupies within it. So he grounds this pretty well. He gives a couple of nods to the other miniseries that are going on at the same time. He also gets major points from me for attention to character chronology. So he's remembering that we're talking about an Aquaman that was grabbed from a very specific point in his timeline. And this is the pre-Zero Hour Aquaman, which means that even though he has had his hand chopped off, he should not have had his special harpoon edition yet. So we're told that when he arrived under the dome, he just had a stump wrapped up in bandages. And eventually he got in touch with Star Labs, and they hooked him up with, no pun intended, with the harpoon that he would eventually sport.
Hey, real quick, Mert, if I may, I actually just read 0 Hour last night, and the original series. And throughout a couple of the issues, you're right, he does have his stump. He's like complaining about the stump. He doesn't have any accessories for you, which is I just was kind of humorous. But
That's funny.
Yeah, so he's actually, you're right. As far as I can remember, and from just reading last night, he doesn't have any of those gadgets yet.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, so this is like right within like the first 3 issues of Peter David's Aquaman series.
Yeah, I think it was issue 2 where he had the incident.
Right. And then I think by number 0, part of the 0 month, he had some kind of makeshift harpoon stuck in there, but he didn't get the fancy golden one from Starlight until a little later than that. So Tony Bedard is paying attention to his history, which is also a good thing as far as I'm concerned. And it's just a very interesting version of Aquaman that we're dealing with here. Very mentally unstable. He's still in a little bit of shock as a result of having lost his hand. And so we get a little bit of the same kind of creepy and, well, not creepy exactly, but slightly scary and off-putting mental instability clinging to this Aquaman under the dome as we got with Tom Pyre's Atom. The citizenry of we're in Metropolis now, by the way. These next 10 minis we'll be talking about are in pre-Zero Hour Metropolis. We're told that Aquaman actually conquers the Metropolis Aquarium, and makes it his own sovereign territory. And then months after that, he decides to go out and try to go on patrol and play the hero to win back the public's regard, but it doesn't quite go very well. So Bedard does a good job of characterizing this troubled Aquaman, and he gives him a great supporting character in Dr. Dane Dorrance, former leader of the Sea Devils and current director of the Metropolis branch of Star Labs, who's the closest thing to a friend that this Aquaman has. And so the interplay between them is kind of entertaining to read. And Bedard does a better job than most of the writers on these Convergence miniseries as far as setting up the guest antagonist from another reality, which in this case is the Wildstorm character Deathblow. He establishes him both as a talented killer and as an interdimensional alien, dropping references to things called Gen Actives, which is what the Wildstorm term for a superhuman that people in the DC universe wouldn't know. This is a character that I, in common with the metropolitan citizens that Deathblow meets, I know nothing about Deathblow. He's just one of a bumper crop of murderous 90s anti-heroes to me, but Bedard does such a good job of introducing him that I almost want to know more about him now. So that's a sign of skill, if anything is. And he's a great match, it seems, for this particular kind of vicious and mean-tempered version of Aquaman from 1994. It's also just nice to see vestiges of an autonomous Wildstorm universe again, as opposed to one that's been forcibly merged in with the regular DC universe. The artwork is quite beautiful, I think. Cliff Richard's art has got kind of a delicate beauty to it, and add in the colors by John Rauch, and it gives everything kind of a softened look, as if even the scenes that take place above water look like they're happening underwater. And there's a couple of panels that are just eye-popping. Check out the scene in the Metropolitan Aquarium where Dane Darns shows up to try to talk Aquaman down, and there's these luminescent pink jellyfish floating in the background. It's eye-popping. Very nice looking, very well written, and plus I'm just kind of a fan of, I remember Peter David's Aquaman run fondly, and I think this is a worthy sort of appendix to that. So, I give this one a definite buy.
I like the art too, and the colors that were used. I think that helps set it, the tone of the story. And again, I'm not familiar with the Wildstorm universe, and so I kind of, not really sure what to expect from Deathblow. But I do like the way that Tony Bedard has, like you said, he shows you who they're going to go up against, by look in the dome.
I enjoyed the issue well enough. It didn't just bowl me over. It's kind of an Aquaman that I've forgotten about, with him being in this state. It's hard to remember all those years back. I think if I would have dug out issues and read what was going on at that time, I may have enjoyed it a little bit more. I thought the guy from the was it Star Labs or the aquarium that was helping him, kind of his friend. That was kind of a neat part for me.
Do you recognize that guy, Shane?
No, I don't.
He was the leader of an actual DC team of underwater explorers from the Silver Age. They were called the Sea Devils.
Oh, okay. All right, well, that kind of makes sense. No, I would not have known that without looking it up or you telling me. It was a fine issue, but there's other things throughout the weeks that I enjoyed more than this.
All right, so moving on then. Next thing will be the Batman Shadow of the Bat. This is written by Larry Hama, pencils by Philip Tan, inks by Jason Paz and Rob Hunter. Shane, what did you think?
I'm going to pants it.
Chad?
Oh, low borrow.
Yeah, Shane, I think I'm going to go with you and give it a pants.
I really like that Larry Hama wrote it. Given my affection for G.I. Joe, I love that. That's great. But I am in no way, never have been. I've tried and tried and tried it. I am no Azrael fan. Not as Asbats, not as regular Azrael. I could care less about John Paul in 90% of the stories I read him in. So to try and read through this was one of the more chore-y ones that I did. The artwork was fine. I just didn't feel the story, and a big part of that was because of Azrael, or Asbats, that was in it. And that's pretty much why I pantsed it. It seemed to have very little to do with the story itself, with the dome. It was just Batman and Asbats going at it, palling around, trying to solve whatever was going on. To a certain extent, it's forgettable to me now because it just irritates me.
I had bad flashbacks to the 90s.
Yeah.
Especially with not only the story and the Nightfalls was probably what got me back into comics, but I don't know, it just wasn't that memorable, and the person or the Wildstorm people that they're going up against are also forgettable and don't look like they're very exciting, people.
Well, and I have such a hard time remembering that Wildstorm's in here. There's only one issue that I enjoyed it that will happen much later. But for all these other ones, it really kind of took me right out of the story.
What, when Wildstorm characters started coming in?
Yeah, a little bit. I just haven't experienced or gotten them into my head that they're part of DC in this fashion yet.
Yeah, it is a little bit jarring, I suppose. And a lot of those old '90s Wildstorm comics weren't well done. They just plain weren't. Yeah, so I think probably Tony Bedard in his Aquaman one-shot gave Death Blow better treatment than he ever got under Wildstorm when it was part of Image.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, so we'll call that the exception to the rule. But getting back to Batman Shadow of the Bat, I agree with the points you made there, Chad, that this is just uncomfortably close to the original '90s material it's supposed to be nostalgically evoking here. I mean, it does offer plenty of action. Hama's always been a good writer for that, but it's really more testosterone than substance. From just action over character, and the Wet Works appearance was pretty flat. I agree with both of you about that. It really does look and feel like an old '90s issue of Shadow of the Bat, which usually ran like self-contained, barely in continuity bat stories focusing on supporting characters. I'm not quite as opposed to the Azrael Batman as you were, Shane. To this day, I think it's a cool costume design. And even though it's clearly not Batman, it's an armored bat-like costume, and I always thought it looked neat. And Jean-Paul Valley, he really does have some psychological complexity to him. He's kind of a pathetic figure when you come right down to it. But we really didn't get much of that in this issue. All we got was this big sort of heist story. So if you're going to do, Batman characters doing some kind of a crime-based adventure in Metropolis, Tobias Whale is a good choice of villain, so I give Hama another pity point for that. But on the whole, the story is totally, on one level, it doesn't even make any sense, because I think it was Brawlinator on the forums pointed out, it makes no sense for Bruce Wayne to show up and try to worm his way into it or infiltrate Tobias Whale's gang, the 100, as himself instead of one of his alter egos, like Matches Malone, for example. So that's kind of silly. And it's just messy, pointless action. The characters are not well written. It doesn't engage the central concept of Convergence well at all. It lacks a human dimension. It's stupid, violent. It's way too '90s, and not in the good way that they should be going for in Convergence. So, yeah, it's a pants. All right, so let's move from there to a different Gotham City character who happens to be stuck in pre-Zero Hour Metropolis. We're going to talk about Catwoman next. It was written by Justin Gray, and the art was by Ron Randall. Chad, I think it's your turn to go first.
Low buy.
Was that low buy or low borrow?
Low buy.
Low buy. Okay, for me it's a low borrow.
And for me it's a pants.
All right, Chad, take it away.
I like the Catwoman parts because that's the part of the, that's one of the first, I guess, Catwoman I remember, reading. That's the first one that had the long ongoing series of the '90s. It's what I guess really threw me off that, she's going to be going up against the Kingdom Come Batman, and that just doesn't look like the Kingdom Come Batman there at the end. It looks, I don't know, but it just looks wrong. It's just off.
Well, yeah, that's part of the problem there is that in Kingdom Come you don't see Batman in his full uniform very much. More often just standing around as Bruce Wayne.
But I think the character of Catwoman, in the '90s was captured, pretty well.
Yeah, Chad, I do agree with you there. I mean, there's no doubting that this is really what the early '90s Catwoman was like. This is definitely the Catwoman of the Jim Ballant era. Yeah, she went back in the day. We've had Catwoman in her own series for so long now that we've kind of forgotten by now what a novelty it was to have an ongoing series starring that character, and we've kind of forgotten that in those days she was less the stealthy professional thief she's been with a big Robin Hood complex that we've seen in comics lately. And in those days she was more of like this costumed exhibitionist with a tiny little embryonic Robin Hood complex. She was less sexy jewel thief and CIA agent, and more like gorgeous lady of wrestling. But the issue starts with a fight scene between Catwoman and a bunch of supervillain roller derby queens, for crying out loud. That's the kind of camp that we're talking about. And Justin Gray does play that up to the hilt. But then when the dome falls, she becomes more the culture hero, more the Robin Hood figure, more of a protector than a thief. She adopts Suicide Slum in Metropolis, just as her future self would eventually adopt the East End of Gotham City. And so we see that this skin-tight purple suit, body sort of Catwoman is it has the potential to evolve along the same lines as her later counterpart would and become more of a protector than a thief. And so we get to see her serving in that role, and from there it becomes a little less fun, I have to say, as she goes on her little rescue mission against Intergang, and there are parts of it that are actually kind of shallow and by the numbers and even cliched. The scenes with Bruno Mannheim, the mob leader, were downright tiresome. I actually thought that the cliffhanger. I understand what you mean about it not really looking very much like Kingdom Come Batman, Chad, but it is who it's supposed to be. And seeing this version, this silly 90s version of Catwoman going up against this very not silly, no-nonsense future Batman could make for a very interesting matchup, especially with Intergang playing spoiler in the middle. So I think this is one case where I think the second issue might actually be even better than the first. Oh, and let me give an extra shout-out to Claire Wendling, who painted the cover, which is kind of a nice little riff on Tim Sale. So, yeah, I give this a borrow, not a very powerful borrow, and I think I'll feel a little more strongly about the second issue when I've seen it. All right, now, Shane, tell us why you've pantsed this.
I know that part of some of these issues don't all center around the matches or the domes per se. This was not my most favorite era of Catwoman. I think that the art done in this book is done very well, and she has portrayed how she was during this era in her time. But the story just didn't do anything for me surrounding the Convergence. It's not until the very end that we really get anything even remotely close to it with seeing the Kingdom Come Batman. So very much akin to the Asbats pantsing. I had a same feeling here. I love how Jim Ballant draws her, but the stories just never did much for me. And I feel the same here. As much as I love Justin Gray, and I think the cover's great and the art was great, the story itself just didn't lend itself to anything close to some of the enjoyment I got out of the other Convergence #1s that I've read.
All right. Next up is going to be Green Arrow. This is from writer Christy Marks, penciler Rags Morales, and inker Claude St. Aubin. I give this one a flat borrow.
I give this a borrow as well.
High borrow, low buy.
Okay. All right. Now, this one, I would have very much liked to see this one written by Chuck Dixon, of course, since he wrote Green Arrow's adventures for a long time. I mentioned earlier he's one of my favorite writers of action-centric stories, and he created Connor Hawke, but he's one of several creators whom DC alienated within the past few years, so his involvement was pretty much precluded. But Christy Marks does a fine job, though, I think, with this era's version of these two characters, and she gets the opportunity to kind of reinvent the wheel a little bit by reimagining the first meeting between these two as adults underneath the dome. So this is allowed to play out slightly differently from the way it did in actual pre-Zero Hour DC continuity. And it is playing fair with Green Arrow's timeline, too. Introducing Connor the way that she does. And we get to see the naive, idealistic version of Connor Hawke and having an opportunity to do some good in the domed Metropolis. So it's more street-level stuff. Again, it's kind of on the order of what Greg Rucka was doing with his Question, except it's nowhere near as interesting. The background thread is going to be the Brothers of Purity, which is kind of a generic white supremacist group. It's a realistic choice of antagonist. You can easily enough imagine such a group popping up in a domed city situation like this, but it's just not a very interesting one. There are some good scenes, some poignant bits of dialogue between Ollie and Connor, and the opening scene with Ollie and the astronomer firing up at the dome is kind of touching. But on the whole, it's just kind of dry for me. The cliffhanger is good, though, because Ollie and Connor come up against the Kingdom Come versions of Dinah Lance and the daughter, the future Kingdom Come Black Canary, who's the daughter of Harley Quinn and Dinah Lance. So Ollie is now going to have to contend with his past in the person of Connor and future in the person of this unborn Kingdom Come daughter all at once. So this is another case where I think the second issue is going to be a little more interesting than the first. But the first one is just a little bland, and I give it just a borrow.
I agree. I really like the cliffhanger for this one. Better than the, I think it was done better than the Catwoman one. But I kind of like the art on this one. I mean, it kind of reminds me of, not only that the time it's supposed to, but it kind of looks a little for me a little Mike Grail-ish almost, just a little bit. And so, like in the beginning part of it, I don't know. It gets less as and once you meet Connor and all that, but Green Arrow is one of my favorite characters. So
for me, I agree with a lot of what you said, Murd. The thing that saved this from being more of a pants for me is that interaction that he had with Connor in the middle of the book towards the end of the book. Otherwise, it's an okay issue, but it's nothing fantastic. It's that father-son string that tugged at my heart enough that I would give it a bar and enjoyed those pages.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought of comparing this artwork to Mike Grell, Chad, but that's a good point. And maybe that's what Morales was going for here. Because another thing I'd wanted to say about this was that it doesn't look like Morales' artwork at all to me. And I had to keep reminding myself that this is Rags drawing it, and he is one of my favorite artists. But maybe that's why I didn't recognize it. Maybe he was going for kind of a Grell homage.
And I was fine with that as well.
All right, let's move on to something else green. From Green Arrow to Green Lantern and Parallax. Okay, this is another offering from Tony Bedard as writer, Ron Wagner as penciler, and Bill Reinhold as inker. Shane, I think it's your turn to start us off.
Pants.
Chad?
Low borrow.
Oh, this one was a buy for me, definitely. All right, Shane, go ahead.
All right, so there's the one scene with Kyle and Hal in the jail, and I enjoyed their conversation. However, the rest of it, I just do not need to revisit Parallax ever, ever, ever again. I thought it was fine when it started, way back when. I was glad when it was over, and I don't need to look at it again. So that kind of took me right out of the whole story right there. This week, incidentally, is my biggest per capita pants compared to the other weeks. And I enjoyed comics at this time, but boy, the Asbats, the Parallax, just not my cup of tea. Not at all. I like seeing Kyle. It's fine that he's in his 90s garb, his first appearance type stuff with the big, thick, 7-inch thick mask it looked like. But again, I liked what they did with him later, developing him. So a lot of this was so 90s-ish to me that it just totally killed any enjoyment I was going to get out of it.
Well, what saved the book for me was that they're going to be going up against the Electropolis universe, and I think before that, that's Lady Quark and Lord Volt. So this is probably the most I've ever seen of them on a page.
True.
And I'd really like to read more of that universe.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. All right. Well, Shane, I think I understand why you pants this now. It's just an aversion to certain elements of, DC's 90s continuity. But, for speaking for myself here, Zero Hour is what got me started reading DC Comics. Actually, Emerald Twilight right before that, and then, leading right into Zero Hour from that. So seeing Parallax, it doesn't rankle me in the least. It actually kind of feels like a homecoming. I just kind of like omnipotent, pissed-off characters as a general rule. So Thanos is his Infinity Gauntlet, and Hal Jordan with his half a central power battery's worth of juice. Both of them they just sort of appeal to the power fantasy tripping 13-year-old in myself. But just putting that aside, whether we are pro-Parallax or anti-Parallax, we're looking at this story as a story here. I'm going to say that Tony Bedard is 3 for 3 as far as I'm concerned. He's turned in some of the most solid scripts in this whole event so far. He really earned his reputation as DC's go-to fill-in guy, which he had for several years there before the New 52 happened. I'm glad that he addressed Parallax in some way, because little as you may like him, Shane, it's hard to encapsulate Zero-Hour era DC continuity without addressing Hal/Parallax and Kyle Rayner in some way.
Oh, true.
And here they are. Did you say something, Shane?
Oh, very true.
Okay. And here they are together, sharing daily cups of human kindness and building a very interesting relationship together. I like the way that they interact here, although the nitpicker in me has to question whether Kyle of that early era, who was still very, if you'll pardon the expression, green and headstrong and very much a reluctant participant in the Green Lantern legacy, would be so respectful of his elders, especially the homicidal kind, as to go and visit Hal every day in prison. Yeah, so I know that was the part of the issue that you really liked, Shane. But it's and I liked it too. But you got to wonder if it's really plausible if you examine it too closely. So anyway, Hal's. I like the fact that Hal committed himself to prison. And I like the fact that once his power was shut off, his guilt immediately washed in. It was Parallax that really did all this stuff, and it wasn't really Hal's personality at all. So his pitiable self-recrimination here is very much in character, though, given his gray-templed, old and tired characterization of the Gerard Jones era back in the early 90s. And I like the fact that Bedard is playing Parallax as kind of like a Mr. Hyde manifestation of power drunkenness, and he's discreetly omitting, you may notice, any mention of a fear entity that made Hal do all of this stuff. The Parallax as this fear parasite that possessed Hal was very much a post-Zero-Hour retcon that Jeff Johns introduced and shouldn't figure here at all, but Bedard plays this very subtly, showing that it's the power somehow that's making Hal do all these things and is warping his personality. And if you like the whole Parallax retcon that Jeff Johns forced on Hal, you can believe that it's still present, but he's not addressing it directly. I think that's very smart. As for Kyle, I think his position here would be maybe even a little more interesting if his girlfriend Alex hadn't been murdered before he was shut in there. If maybe he had something to come home to if he won this little battle that's set up for him. I completely agree with Chad that the Earth 6 or Electropolis characters are a welcome addition to this issue, and also to the Supergirl Matrix miniseries we'll be getting to later on. And I also agree with Chad that I would have liked to read a whole one-shot or miniseries based on nothing but those characters, since we saw so little of them in Crisis on Infinite Earths. I'd like to see more about what the culture, government, politics, what the world of Earth 6 is like. Yeah, so I really do think that Bedard has been turning in the best scripts of this event so far. You could, as far as I'm concerned, just go ahead and buy any of these miniseries that have his name on them. He's even made Princess Fern interesting, gave her a little bit of extra backbone. And Ron Wagner's artwork is pretty good. Paul Mounts does the colors, which is important for anything that's involving green lanterns. And just the relationship that grows between Kyle and Hal in this issue it's fun to witness, and it is just overall, in my opinion, a strong story. So if you don't cringe at the sight of Hal Jordan wearing that Parallax costume again, I think this is worth your time. I give it a buy. All right, now let's jump on ahead here to Justice League International. All right, this one is written by Ron Mars again. Mike Manley does the artwork, and the colors are by Chris Sotomayor. Shane, I know this is one that you've been itching to talk about, so we'll let you go first.
That's probably true. There's only one other series in this entire event that gets a higher buy than this one. So this is a total... I have 4 buys aside of this one.
Chad, what did you think?
Buy.
I have to go just the opposite. Well, not just the opposite. That would be like multiple pants. I'm giving this an extremely weak on-life support borrow. All right, Shane, gush away.
Well, this is also one of the few... There's only 2 that I have read number 2 as well, and I read number 2 for this one. this miniseries, number 2 too. I really enjoyed how the story was told. I felt pretty darn nostalgic, like I was back in the old JLI days or in the Generation Lost era when that came out during Brightest Day, or the middle there where the 2 miniseries of Justice League characters were from my JLI guys.
Oh, right. I can't believe it's not the Justice League.
That's it. God, I was blanking out on the title.
Known as the Justice League.
It just rang true. There were a couple things missing. You know, Guy Gardner's missing from this. Booster's missing from this. And they're important parts of that whole team dynamic. But there was enough there that gave me such a good nostalgic feeling that I really enjoyed it. It had to deal with the miniseries. It had to deal with the event. You got to see some of the Kingdom Come guys, and especially in the second issue, that all comes to fruition. And I think both of these together is probably one of the strongest series in this entire event. Part of that's my personal bias in how much I love these characters, but I was looking really just so much forward to this, and I was not let down. I enjoyed it very much thoroughly.
I don't know. I just again, I like the. I think Ron Mars wrote this one better than he did the Batman and Robin one, and I think I'm more excited for the battle with the Kingdom Come characters in this one as opposed to the other ones.
And there's 2 parts in the second issue that I won't give away that just make me squeal with enjoyment.
And this, I think I like, this is one of the versions of the Blue Beetle Ted Kord that I really like, as opposed to what he was there before Infinite Crisis, as kind of a joke or just kind of not really taken seriously.
Yeah, he's really the leader of this group in this one.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Shane, I'm glad you enjoyed it as much as you did. You told me a little while ago that this is one of the few of these miniseries that you were just dying to read the second issue of.
Yes, it was.
Yep, and I'm glad that that issue, too, proved to be worth it for you. Myself, I responded not as well to this. I think I'd agree with Chad as far as this being better written by Mars than the Batman and Robin number 1 issue was. But on the whole, I think Ron Mars is 0 for 2, and he just overall does not seem to be taking this Convergence writing assignment seriously at all. Certain narrative elements here are so badly telegraphed and so simplistically written that I felt like I was reading like an all-ages book, like maybe an issue of Spidey Super Stories or something. Characterization is off once again here. And Blue Beetle was certainly strong. I mean, he's let's put it where he's at. With the exception of Martian Manhunter, he's pretty much the only member of the JLI that is given anything to say or do in this issue. He's the only one other than John Jones who is given any chance to evince a personality whatsoever. And he's still being played a little bit too much like the comedian here. I mean, it's not as a joke, as Chad said, but as a comedian. And in this, at least, this is at least period authentic to me in that it evokes what the Justice League had become by the time we got to the early 90s. When the salad days of Wahaha were kind of behind us, Giffen and DeMatteis had moved on, and other lesser writers were writing the characters by then, and but still enough of the old magic was lingering that they felt compelled to write Booster and Beetle as the funny guys, and they kept giving them these one-lines to say that tended to fall a little bit flat, and the whole thing was just a little bit depressing. And I got the same vibe from this, actually. Beetle is still trying to crack his jokes. He is at least a functional leader, and he's doing fine for all the pressure that's being put upon him running this team of makeshift powerless losers in Metropolis, trying to fend off attacks by the robot armies, which is another thing. Metallo was written pretty badly out of character here. The post-crisis Metallo was a cheap grifter, not an Ultron-style city conqueror. But so Beetle is doing his best to hold the team together, but the result is, in my opinion, a little bit on the depressing side. And he and John Jones had their little tete-a-tete, and that scene worked fairly well for me. But on the whole, it just sort of falls flat, and then the Kingdom Come characters show up at the end, and they're handled very two-dimensionally, I feel. And yeah, it's all just kind of forgettable. And the one thing that prevents me from just pantsing this issue outright is the artwork of Mike Manley. He's it's slightly cartoony, but still solidly, boldly designed artwork. One of my favorite Bizarro sketches in my Bizarro sketch collection was drawn by him at a Baltimore convention a number of years ago. I always liked to see his work on the printed page. He did an issue of Superman focusing on the prankster a few years ago that I thought was very strong. But that's like the major bright point in this for me. Ron Mars just really didn't have his head entirely in the game with the issues of this Convergence thing he's writing, and yeah, I can't give this any kind of high recommendation at all, unless, like Shane, you are just really into anything Justice League International, and as Shane has put it several times in the past, even if it were a turd, you'd buy it.
This is very true.
So, yeah, your mileage may vary. I guess that's the central point here. Okay, now that we've had our say on that, next will be the Suicide Squad miniseries, written by Frank Thierry with art by Tom Mandrake. Chad, I think it's your turn to give your rating first.
Pants.
This one for me is kind of a weak and hesitant buy.
And I gave it a borrow.
All right, we're covering the gamut here. Okay, Chad, why is it a pants for you?
I don't know. I just couldn't get into the whole I couldn't get into this era of the Suicide Squad. I don't know why. And again, they're going up against the Kingdom Come. I guess specifically Alan Scott, and I don't know. It just fell flat for me.
Yeah, honestly, Chad, I was expecting this issue to fall flat for me too. I've loved the Suicide Squad concept for many a year. I have pretty much every issue of John Ostrander's run from the '80s, and in a way, I'm kind of upset that they didn't get him to write this. Although goodness knows he could use the work. Although they did get his frequent collaborator and Tom Mandrake at least to do the artwork. So some fragment of the Ostrander spirit is represented through that. And Thierry, Frank Thierry is a writer that I've always kind of thought of as that former Joe Quesada crony who never has entirely deserved the work he's gotten in comics. So I came into this preparing not to like it. But Thierry really kind of impressed me with the ambitious setup he's put together in this first issue. There is a whole heck of a lot of cool stuff that he has managed to put into this first issue. I mean, we've got an appearance by the Toyman, which always helps to win me over. We've got Deadshot and Boomerang doing their scumbag thing. That's one thing that Thierry has always been able to write well. It's stuff of the form unpleasant tough guys working clandestinely to accomplish unpleasant things. And he's doing that pretty well here, too. So the opening scene with Boomerang and Deadshot conniving with the Toyman was really cool. And then we get Amanda Waller and Oracle and Carol Ferris and Major Sam Lane, too, working to put together the Suicide Squad again to go up against Alan Scott of Kingdom Come and his wacky ELO out-of-the-blue inspired space station, New Oa. And they put together such a Suicide Squad. Not only are there old favorites like Deadshot, Boomerang, Count Vertigo, Bronze Tiger, but we're also bringing in a bunch of psychotic 90s badasses like Bane and Black Manta, and the specific version of Deathstroke who just recently had to kill his own son Jericho because he'd been impregnated with a Trigon seed. So that's like bringing in the post-hand loss Aquaman. This is another really man-on-the-edge kind of version of the character to bring in. And they're also throwing in Cyborg Superman, and Carol Ferris has her Star Sapphire powers, so yet another loose cannon thrown into the mix. And we're told that there's a mole on the Kingdom Come side of things. Kingdom Come Lex Luthor apparently wielding a Sinestro power ring. So there's all kinds of it's just chock-a-block with interesting characters, and it's a very volatile situation that Thierry has managed to construct here. My hat has to be off to him for all the stuff that he's put in here. But then I stop short and I wonder, is he going to be able to follow through? I mean, is he going to be able to do anything in the one issue that he has left to him to tell this story to really capitalize on all the potential he's amassed here, or is he just going to kill everybody? And given that this is Suicide Squad, the latter does seem a little more likely to me. So I'm kind of fearing the outcome here. I may be disappointed in the second issue, but just judging this strictly on the merits of the first issue and all the cool stuff that Thierry's managed to pack into it, I'm really kind of intrigued. So that's why I gave it a buy, but not the most confident sort of buy. But yeah, so we'll just have to see what happens in number 2.
You know what, Murr? This is going to be a rare instance where I'm going to change my bar to a buy, because listening to you is what I would say about this issue, and I can't think of why I wouldn't want to buy this first issue. I agree the second issue may fall flat if he can't pull it all together, but there's a lot of great, interesting, neat things in here, and the cast of characters, like you said, that is presented to us is just phenomenal. I think the only thing you may not have mentioned, unless I missed it, is that really the first 2 pages, you see the end of the story first. And there are times when I really enjoy that kind of storytelling. I hope the second issue does come through and gives another strong 2-part miniseries to this. But yeah, I enjoyed everything. And at the very least, if there's nothing else other than the great cast of Suicide Squad characters, Oracle, Ferris, Sam Lane, everything, Amanda Waller the way I think she should look and act doesn't hurt either.
Right. She's just as big as she ought to be.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to have to go back and read it again.
It was fun.
Glad I won you over, Shane. All right, now 3 more to go here, and they're all members of the Superman family. And the first one of these is going to be Superboy, which is written by Fabian Nicieza, pencils by Carl Moline, inks by Jose Marzan Jr. And I guess it's my turn to go first. So this one is a borrow.
Borrow.
Pants.
All right, fair enough. Okay, so I'll start by saying that I mentioned a little while ago that I really liked Tom Grummett's pencils on the Superboy series of the 90s. So I'm kind of sorry that they used him for the Speed Force series instead of this, because the artwork that we do get from Carl Moline and Jose Marzan Jr. is just, it's very blah. It's almost amateurish, really. It lacks, the verve and just a Kirby type off-the-wall imaginative fun that we often got from the Carl Kiesel and Tom Grummett Superboy series of the 90s, which I enjoyed very much, even though it took a little while before the lead character won me over. I always did find the clone Superboy kind of obnoxious, and as the character evolved over the years, he only kind of got more obnoxious to me, to be truthful. I mean, at first he came off as kind of this lame, stereotyped attempt of over-the-hill editors to try and come up with something that 90s kids were going to consider rad, But over time, Carl Kiesel learned to play that somewhat self-consciously. The reason that this guy is so over-the-top, trying too hard to be cool with his fade cut and his leather jacket and all that stuff, was that he was a test tube baby. He'd been born and raised in a laboratory, so of course he knew nothing about what it meant to be a real live boy, a cool guy, other than what he was able to absorb through like MTV and whatever other like learning tapes Project Cadmus fed him. So at least he had an excuse for being the way he was, and I actually kind of learned to love him for it. He was like an unwitting self-parody, and also a parody of other attempts made by the entertainment industry to try too hard to court youth. And so he was kind of fun for that reason. But then he became the moody, sullen teenager Connor Kent under Jeff Johns, and I liked him a lot less. So this is a return to the version of the character that I actually grew to love, but unfortunately being put under the dome and being separated from his powers has made him, it sunk him into a funk, and he's a lot less fun to read than he had been when Carl Kiesel was writing his stories in the 90s. So, yeah, if you liked that series, on the art front and the writing front, this is not going to be quite as much fun as you remembered. Now, this is still Fabian Nicieza doing the writing, so, that's a name I've come to trust. He does character well, but I'll say that his script here lacks the palpable sense of purpose he had in Titans, where he was trying to get redemption for Roy Harper. Instead, it exhibits signs of kind of going through the motions a little bit, kind of like what Ron Mars is doing with his scripts, but not quite as bad. It is just kind of nice to see Connell, even if he is kind of depressed, back again. He gets some good supporting players in the form of Serling Rockhet, the funky lady scientist, and also Double X. He's always been good as an expositor because he's so level-headed and rational and sort of a Vulcan level of rationality and logic. And he's also a telepath, so he gives us a little bit of character insight into the Kingdom Come guys that Superboy finds himself fighting. He telepathically gleans that they're naturally distrustful of irresponsible young heroes because those are basically the antagonists of the whole Kingdom Come series, where the old guard heroes have to come back and clean up after the young, destructive heroes that have taken over for them. So seeing this irresponsible young Superboy, arrogant youth going up against paranoid age in the person of Dick Grayson, Wally West, and, of course, Kingdom Come Superman, should make for an interesting fight. Though with all the Kingdom Come characters they're using, I'm starting to think they should have given them their own miniseries, truthfully. I think I would have liked to read it. So anyway, it revisits a character that I enjoyed in the 90s, but it doesn't give him quite the same oomph that he had in those days. The second issue may be better, but for now I can't give it anything better than a borrow.
The only thing I kind of liked about the issue was the way they used the Kingdom Come characters. I mean, with having Dick Grayson kind of scouting him out and using Wally to distract Superboy, and then him running into the Kingdom Come Superman.
Again, with this era, this was not any kind of Superboy that I enjoyed reading. I enjoyed what they did with him when he got to the Young Justice age or level. That was one of my favorite portrayals of Superboy and the other characters he interacted with there. So for me, this was really almost a throwaway issue as I was reading it. I just don't like him at this stage.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with you there, actually, Shane. I did like Superboy at that point, but in his current frame of mind under the dome, he's just not as much fun as he was. And I think maybe if they'd made this a Young Justice instead, although Young Justice wouldn't have been period appropriate for pre-Zero Hour, if he'd had Impulse and Tim Drake to play off of, perhaps, maybe that would have raised his spirits and brought out the best in him. Would that have been better for you to read, do you think?
Oh, my God, yeah. Yeah, hands down.
I agree.
All right, so we're all kind of unanimous this was underwhelming. So let's move on to something that I think is going to be a little more crowd-pleasing. This is Supergirl Matrix, written by Keith Giffen, pencils by Timothy Green II, inks by Joseph Silver. Shane, I think it's your turn to rate it first.
Now, this I'm going to go against the grain, and I'm hoping you convince me otherwise because I pants this one. I've never been a fan of the Supergirl Matrix really at all, but I want to hear what you say.
All right, and so you shall. Chad, what did you think?
I think it's a low buy, maybe a strong borrow.
Okay, well, let's call it a buy-RO then. That's legit. For me, this is a strong buy, actually, just because it's a change of pace. All right, Shane, let us know what you didn't like about it.
I've just never been a fan of this series. I tried it, and so many people raved about it when it was out there, when Supergirl was the Matrix, and I never liked this version of Lex Luthor, which I even forget what he was called in the regular comics.
Lex Luthor 2, I think, or Lex Luthor.
Really? Okay.
It's when he was masquerading as his own Australian-born son.
Yes. That's what I remember, and not fondly. I love Keith Giffen as a writer. This just didn't do it for me. I'm really hoping Merd's pep talks me into it.
I just like the fact that it has more of the has Lord Volt and Lady Quark in it, and they seem like they have the exact same relationship that Lex and Supergirl have, almost.
Yeah.
And of course, it can't be all that bad when Ambush Bug shows up.
Oh, you have hit the nail on the head, my friend. Yeah, I remember earlier when I said that Fastback from the Zoo Crew was the second best guest cameo in Convergence. Well, this is the best. All right, yeah, this for me was just a real breath of fresh air. It took itself not at all seriously. I mean, a lot of these other miniseries do have strong elements of humor, but this was 100 proof humor. You know, this is true wahaha humor, except no substitutes. So I understand what you're saying, Shane, about not being a fan of this version of Supergirl or Lex Luthor. You know, honestly, I do have this here in my notes that I'm not entirely certain that Lex Luthor 2, the Australian guy, he probably shouldn't even still be around by this point in the continuity. Metropolis of 1994, right before Zero Hour. I kind of think that ruse had been exposed, and Lex Luthor 2's body had been subjected to degenerative clone disease by then. So. But in any event, Luthor here is not even pretending to be the good-natured, all-around nice guy Lex Luthor II. He's not doing the Australian accent. He's not trying in any way to be nice to Supergirl. He's just being an all-around bastard, which, of course, makes him very entertaining to read. So our hero is it's the Matrix Supergirl. This is before, when you said, Shane, that everyone was raving to you about how great this version of Supergirl was. Mm-hmm. I think they were talking about the Peter David series, which started in 1996, which took the Matrix Supergirl, who is just this shape-shifting blob of protoplasm from a pocket universe, and merged her with a human girl named Linda Danvers. And somewhere along the line, it was also established that this fusion of Linda Danvers and Matrix was also like an Earthborn angel, and it got really kind of convoluted. But I think that's probably the version of Supergirl people were telling you about. This version of Supergirl, most people, in common with you, Shane, never really warmed up to. And I can't say that I was a particular fan either. I mean, this very early 90s Superman stuff. I wasn't even really reading comics when all of this stuff was going on, when Matrix Supergirl was acting as bodyguard to Lex Luthor II and all that. But you don't really need to know anything about any of that to appreciate this story, though. It's just silly fun. I mean, from the very first page, when Giffen has these humorous captions, we're talking about how comics don't give you enough recap pages these days. It would take an entire recap issue just to unpack the entire origin of the Matrix Supergirl. So Giffen gives us one asterisk caption, and then halfway through he just says, "Let's just move on, shall we?" That's just setting the tone for the whole issue, which is really just about pairs of characters. As Chad pointed out, we have Lex Luthor and Supergirl on one side bickering with each other, and then parallel to that, we have Lady Quark and Lord Volt bickering on the other side of the marker, because they are the opponents that Matrix Supergirl is supposed to fight in this issue. So Matrix is kind of like our hapless, slightly vacuous heroine, usually outvoiced and shouted down by everyone around her. And Lex Luthor 2 is kind of like the abusive Abbott to her Costello, And then on the other side, we've got the blustering, bickering Quark and Volt, who are portrayed as, a closeted homosexual couple who were married against their will by their royal parents. And then their interplay, they clearly can't stand each other. It's very amusing, if a tiny bit objectionable, perhaps. The three-way patter that shared between Supergirl and those two, it's worthy of the dialogue in a Looney Tune, actually, and I mean that in the most complimentary possible way. And did I mention, Ambush Bug really does show up in the end, as Chad told us a few minutes ago. So the second issue is going to be a lot more fun, I think. So, yeah, it's just a lot of this really snappy, fast-paced, profuse verbal humor that Keith Giffen loves to do. Just characters talking endless circles around each other, insulting each other rapid fire. Yeah, so you don't need to know much about Matrix Supergirl or about the characters from Earth 6 that they're supposed to be fighting here to just enjoy the patter that Giffen sets up. The artwork, on the other hand, is a little more of an acquired taste. It reminds me of what Maura Tate's artwork would look like if he'd idolized J. Scott Campbell instead of Jack Kirby. He's maybe a little bit too fond of wasps' weights and booty shots, and he tends to draw people's hair like tentacles, so everyone looks like sea anemones. It's showing what may be kind of a street graffiti influence. And I want to give a special shout-out to letterer Corey Breen for presenting Giffen's funny dialogue in a slightly larger than average font, because after reading all of these issues, my eyes were beginning to cross, and it's just nice to have a slightly larger word balloon or two to read to give me a rest. So, yes, this is just quality Giffen humor. If you remember the good old days of the Justice League, if you've been enjoying Justice League 3000, I see no reason why you wouldn't be able to cotton to this. And plus, there's the ambush bug cameo. You don't want to miss that.
I think this is probably... Oh, sorry. I think this is probably one of the first things that Giffen has written that I've actually enjoyed. Everything else just kind of not worked for me.
Okay, well, I'm glad this one at least found your sweet spot.
All right, so you didn't convince me to just change right away, but you did make me write a note down to reread it and give it another try.
Oh, sure. And then try the second issue. And did you enjoy the Ambush Bug miniseries, Shane?
I did, and I did like the cameo at the end.
All right, so we are now on the home stretch, folks. We have only one more in the second wave of Convergence #1s to talk about here. The rest will follow in another episode, hopefully. And that is going to be Superman, Man of Steel, starring John Henry Irons, Steel. This is written by Louise Simonson, penciled by June Brigman, inks by Roy Richardson. And I can't remember whose turn it is to go first. Is it mine?
Yeah, just go. That's good.
I think, yeah, okay. I went around with myself on this, and I decided ultimately to pants it.
I'll pants it, too.
I am a pants as well.
Wow. Sorry to hear it. It's unanimous. Sorry, Wheezy. Yeah, all right, so this is brought to us by the Power Pack creative team of Louise Simonson and artist June Brigman, whose byline I haven't seen in a comic anywhere in a good long time. It focuses on John Henry Irons, the man called Steel, Dr. Emil Hamilton, longtime Superman supporting cast member, and Steele's two slightly annoying, his niece and nephew Jamal and Natasha, as they all hang out at their Uncle Steele's laboratory, the Steelworks. And Steel is involved in trying to be proactive, trying to figure out the dome and how to bring it down. And I'm glad that somebody underneath one of these crazy domes is trying to make effective, proactive strides to understand the situation. But beyond that, I got to say, Steel here is just doing exactly what he did back in the 90s, fighting generic armored bad guys. And that's what he does. There's way too much emphasis here put on the Steel siblings, who are following far too closely in the footsteps of annoying cartoon sidekicks of the past. They call John Henry Uncle Steel, which sounds way too much like Huey, Dewey, and Louie going, Uncle Donald, for my comfort. Then there's a fight with the Parasite, who sadly is written as all powers and no personality. Too few writers give proper shrift to the villains. And then the Gen 13 kids come in, and they're kind of portrayed flatly. So, again, Wildstorm characters not getting the best treatment. The best thing about the issue, as far as I'm concerned, is the introduction of Alley Cat, the cyber-organic kitty, the feline phalanx, if you will. It's a pretty grueling cliffhanger as Steel ends this issue with his body badly battered and broken and probably paralyzed, and thus leaving pre-Zero Hour Metropolis in peril. But the whole thing, it's not really a badly done story, but it is a perfectly mediocre 90s-style superhero action comic. Not bad, not good, and really more bad than good. So I decided, even though it may not entirely deserve a pants, it's one that can easily enough be skipped. So I'm encouraging everyone to do so. Save yourself some time and money. I'll call it a pants.
Yeah, same here. It just didn't work for me, and I've never, got into that period of the Superman and Steel stories. So, and again, it was Gen 13, so I think that's why they brought his nephews into it.
Yeah, you're probably right. And I love Gen 13. That was the tiny little bright spot, even though they were very flat. I just wasn't feeling the story. I agree with you, Murd. Parasite was just all power, no personality at all. The niece and nephew got in the way of everything in a bumbling, haphazard way that probably shouldn't have even happened, given that they're hanging around the Steelworks anyway and trying to help out. So it just really... When you say you can just skip this one, I truly think you can.
Yeah, Yeah, sorry to end this series of reviews on such a blah note, but there you have it.
Well, yes, at some point we will try to finish up with the third and fourth weeks of the Crisis on Infinite Earth characters. But it just ran a little too long this episode, so we'll get to that in a future time. But
and technology was not in our corner either.
Yes.
So.
No, it wasn't.
Please do forgive us for making you sit through 2 installments of this, but we will do our due duty to you, the listeners. We know that a lot of you are interested in this Convergence event, but didn't want to have to put in the time and money to read the stuff yourself, so we want to be your guide. We give you the thumbs ups and thumbs downs you need to know to make informed purchases.
And I didn't mind because for my and it's going to sound a little bit downer anyway, but my disdain for what DC's kind of moving towards anyway, this to me was like a last hurrah of a cross-section of all kinds of things I loved and hated about everything I've ever read in DC since I started. So even the stuff that I'm pantsing, I'm still enjoying going through it because, like I said, to me this is, for now, a big last hurrah on a lot of DC stuff for me.
Well said, Shane. I totally agree. Even the stuff that I'm not liking, I am kind of liking.
Yeah.
All right, Chad, any last thoughts from your end?
Not really. I mean, I think we've kind of covered, the first half.
All right. Well, then I guess that'll wrap it up for this episode. Yeah, Shane, get on the ball there.
I'm waiting for the sponsorship. I'm all out of whack. Visit us at comicgeekspeak.com. To send us an email, the address is comicgeekspeak@gmail.com. To leave a voicemail, the number is 267-702-6642. Stop by The Comic Forums and comment on this episode. Let us know what you liked and didn't like. Follow us on Twitter. Like us on Facebook. Thanks to everyone who contributes and listens to the show. We appreciate it. Send in some Muddle the Merds. I'm sure they'll come at some point. We're going to get there. And as always, we are uniting the world's mightiest heroes, one listener at a time.